Oops and Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
I think GB News is completely unique in the way that we interact with our viewers.
Our audience aren't afraid to have their say. They want their voices heard now, and they've got a channel where that can happen.
I find more and more as I'm wandering around, people come up to me and they say, "We saw you on television." I say, "Oh yes, on what?" "On GB News." "Hello, are you the famous Sue?"
The whole crew hit me here now. We came to celebrate.
It's our job to be the eyes and ears of the viewers.
They are part of the GB News family, and I'm pleased to say it's a very large family.
And if people go to the time and trouble of listening and watching, then we've got to do a good job for them.
Well, I'm here right in the epicentre of the protest.
Here we go again.
You just tuned in. Where have you been?
It is raucous here tonight.
That's what makes us the fearless champion of Britain.
Live from London, England, on a day of celebration for this great country, this is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. A GB News exclusive, ladies and gentlemen. From the White House to the Pentagon, Reform UK has spent the day building ties with Trump's America. Robert Jenrick is standing by with the great Ben Leo in Washington, DC to reveal why he's there and how Britain is really viewed from across the pond. And breaking tonight, Britain's housing battle. The Conservatives want to evict foreign nationals from social housing, claiming hundreds of thousands of homes could be freed up.
Andy Burnham's ambitions for Britain are too small.
And panorama payback. President Trump's lawyers have just accused the BBC of exploiting his $10 billion lawsuit for political gain.
I'm not looking to get into lawsuits, but I think I have an obligation to do it. This was so egregious.
And the MAGA heir. President Trump has reportedly told donors whom he will be supporting as the next presidential nominee. But after seeing some of the polling for Marco Rubio, he might be asking this yet again.
Thrilled to be joined by a proud Marine Corps veteran Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D.? Where's J.D.? What the hell happened to J.D.?
Oh, we'll miss him when he's gone. And all day, GB News has been celebrating Britain by broadcasting from every corner of this great country, showcasing the people and places that make the United Kingdom special. What do you love most about Britain? I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome to The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with the People's Channel on a wonderful day, both for GB News and indeed for the country. Joining me is a all-star panel. In London, we have former Conservative MP Louise Mensch and everyone's favourite lefty, former Labor MP Stephen Pound. In Washington, DC, former Chief of Staff to Marco Rubio, Matt Terrell, and Democratic strategist Mally Smith. Friends of the show, one and all, thank you so much for joining me, team. Let's go to GB News presenter Ben Leo first and foremost, who is in Washington, DC with this interview.
Will, thanks very much. Joined now by Robert Jenrick, Reform UK, here in Washington, DC. Rob, welcome along to the Late Show Live studio.
Very good. I'm pleased to be in GB News HQ in Washington. Yeah.
What do you reckon? Not bad?
It's very good. I'm proud of everything you've achieved.
What are you doing here in DC?
Well, I've come hot on the heels of Nigel and others in recent weeks to continue to build relationships. We're preparing for government. There may be 3 years for a general election, or it could be much sooner than that, and so we want to be ready. And so I've been meeting a whole host of people from throughout the administration, the Treasury Department, the Pentagon, and this evening I've met the Vice President as well.
Oh, wow, OK. Who organised that? How does that happen, the sort of mechanics of it?
It's just within our party, actually. We're actually a group of people who have, in different ways, long-standing relationships here in Washington.
You've got connections.
Well, Nigel, obviously, above all others, but he's not alone. It's very important to us that we have a strong relationship with the United States. It is our primary defence, security, trading relationship, and under a reform government, whilst we'll obviously always put the interests of British people and our own country first, we want to maintain and deepen that relationship.
Yeah, and some would argue maybe some repair work to do after what we saw with Keir Starmer's first couple of years.
Yeah, and I saw a slightly embarrassing debut of Ed Miliband on the world stage
with Rubio.
Yesterday with Rubio. So look, this is an important relationship to us, and whether it's Nigel, who I hope will be our next Prime Minister, or myself, if I was lucky enough to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, I want us to have very deep and constructive relationships.
Yes. Well, it could potentially be, if JD Vance is the nominee in a couple of years' time, it could be JD Vance as President, Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. You've met Vance before was it the Cotswolds last year?
I did.
You had a few bevies with him and Thomas Skinner. What's he like as a guy?
He's someone who has a very long-standing interest in the UK. His wife studied at Cambridge University. He's extremely knowledgeable about our country, and that's a very positive thing. Of course, we don't always agree on everything, and what is reform's foreign policy? It's putting Britain and our own interests first. We're a party built on our own national preference, and so we're not going to blindly follow what the US or indeed the Trump administration has to say. But it is all for the good that we have a deep relationship with them and can speak as friends in a way that I just don't think Keir Starmer or now Andy Burnham is able to do, because they just don't have that relationship.
No. Can I ask you mentioned the Trump administration, what they're doing. Is reform keeping a keen eye on what goings on here in America, particularly with reference to, say, deportations of illegals, ICE and so on? Are you taking tips and analysis of what's happening here for potentially what could happen in the UK with illegals being deported and the kind of process that you might expect in Britain?
Well, I think there's a lot we can learn. The Trump administration came in with a very clear plan as to how they would secure the southern border. We've set out our plan this week, where we've said that we would bring in the armed forces, in particular the Royal Navy, and we would take back every single migrant who attempted to cross the Channel to France, and not a single one would step foot on British soil. It's also important to see now that the Trump administration has moved on to deporting illegal migrants. I think 3,000 illegal migrants are being removed from the United States every day at the moment, and we've been very clear we want to see every single illegal out of the UK, and that is millions of people.
Would you expect the same kind of process in the UK as we've seen here in America?
No, it will
Minneapolis?
It will be different.
In what way?
Well, we'll do it in a British way. We're not going to, use the same tactics that the United States do, but there'll be things that we can learn from that. You have to have a credible threat of forced deportation to encourage people to leave voluntarily. And that is something that we can learn from the US. And look, if I was an illegal migrant in the UK and Reform won the general election, I would know that in Nigel Farage, in Zia Youssef, and our whole team, you got serious people here. Yeah. This is happening. Now is the time to leave. Equally, who will be celebrating if Reform does not win the election and Andy Burnham continues as our Prime Minister? Well, it will be illegal migrants, because they know that life is going to be easier and they're not going to have to leave. So it's very important that we have a serious, credible set of people and a plan behind us. The other thing I'd just say that you can learn from the administration here is people want to see action. They don't want a 10-year plan to fix this problem, or indeed any of the other woes that the UK faces, like our stagnating economy. They want to know what in the first 100 days will a reform government do. And what we said this week is there'll be a meeting around the cabinet table with the First Sea Lord, day one of a reform government, and we'll get that deployed to the Channel, and we'll get those boats turned back.
Okay, so that moves us on to defence spending. I understand you've been at the Pentagon at some point today or yesterday. What are you learning from the Pentagon, from defence chiefs here with reference to the UK?
Well, I don't think it's unreasonable that the United States have formed the view that Europe, including the UK, cannot just piggyback on the US security guarantee indefinitely. That's not just a Trump administration position, it's one that Obama and his predecessors had as well. You know from your many conversations here in Washington, it's basically a cross-party position that the US taxpayer should not be paying forever for the security of the United Kingdom and Europe. So we have to step up. We have to spend more on defence. At Reform, we've been clear. We are going to meet our NATO obligations of reaching 3% and then 3.5% in the course of the next Parliament. That is very important. The only way that we will be able to do that as a country is growing the economy, but cutting public spending where there is waste. And almost uniquely in British politics, we've been very clear about how we will do that. No benefits to people who aren't British citizens, no more foreign aid to rich countries, scrap all the net zero subsidies, and this I think is the most important one of all, get the millions of people who are currently choosing not to work on benefits back into the workplace. It's only that if you do that, which is a proper plan for fiscal responsibility, that we'll be able to properly fund our defence and stand tall in the world. Because the message when you come to Washington is, they don't want people just saying things. They've heard it all before. They want to see that backed up. And they see some countries in the world beginning to back it up. Poland, for example, with increased defence spending.
Well, 500,000 Poles left the UK last year. Strong borders, great economy.
Germany beginning to do it by making commitments to rearm. They want to see the UK back up the words that they've heard latterly from Keir Starmer, maybe from Andy Burnham in the months ahead, with actual action. With reform, I think they can see that we mean business.
So are these the kind of things you're telling the administration when you speak to them, when you come over? You're saying, look, if you get a reform government in the UK, you can probably expect something like this?
Yeah, I've been very clear. I've been very clear that we will increase defence spending, and we want to work with the US because we want to bring back good jobs. And so I want to have reindustrialisation of communities across the United Kingdom with good defence jobs. That's really only going to happen if you have a reform government, puts British people first, ensures that we actually make the savings elsewhere that we can plough into defence.
Do you think the Trump administration, or indeed the MAGA movement, the Republican movement, do you think they would like a reform government, whenever it may be, a couple of years?
Look, there's obviously good relationships, that's clear, from Nigel, but also a number of us now. Zia was here in Washington the other day, I'm here. The fact that senior members of the administration give time to us, I don't see them doing that to others. But ultimately, it's up to them who they want to support. What we're interested in is the interest of the British people, putting them first.
We're slightly pushed for time. I'm just going to rush you on this. Chagos, any word on the street, any gossip from DC about the Chagos situation, or indeed from Andy Burnham?
I have raised this in all the meetings that I've had, and I hope that this can be killed off. It's pretty clear that the attitude here is that Keir Starmer, the Labour Party, bought all this international human rights garbage. They were putting how they were perceived in international courts or on the legal circuit above the security interests of the United Kingdom, also of the United States, because this is an incredibly important strategic base to this country as well as to our own. So let's see what happens, but I hope that the tide has turned on that.
Okay, finally, and I appreciate your time. I'm sure you've seen these comments. Dominic Cummings this morning, in the wake of all the, and actually Zia Youssef warned. I was with him at some social event a couple of years ago, and he predicted what would happen. Likewise, Dominic Cummings, he said there'd be establishment attacks, there'll be leaks from organisations and so on. Dominic Cummings has written this morning, says Farage and his team already can't cope with the regime campaign against him, and it's only just got going. Is that the case? Is reform? I mean,
well, we could definitely cope with it.
Look at the polls. You're sort of floundering a little bit in the polls.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, there are polls at the moment showing that we're neck and neck, basically, with Labour. and this is the absolute zenith of Andy Burnham. He's just come in. People understandably, it's the British way, are giving him the benefit of the doubt. I suspect they'll see through him pretty quickly.
But
is the establishment throwing a lot at us? Yeah, absolutely. Why? Because we represent change. The arguments that we're all making, ending mass migration, ending the net zero madness, these are arguments that have not been mainstream opinions. They're increasingly, because we're winning the argument, but there are many, many people in the mainstream media, the two old failed political parties and their acolytes who do not want us to succeed.
You may have 3 years left of this. Well, how do you deal with it?
We just have to keep...
Is it going to get too much at some point?
No, look, we're just getting started.
I think they are as well.
Look, it's tough at times.
I think they're just getting started.
For sure, but we're going to push on, because what matters ultimately is the country. Everybody who's joined Reform has joined really for the same reason. They see the country slipping away, they see it in a terrible state, and they want to fix it. They want to turn it around. So we are not a group of people who are snowflakes. We're not backing down. We're going to keep going, and we think they're on the right side of history.
Okay, Robert Jenrick, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming into DC.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Robert.
That was the great Ben Leo with Reform's Robert Jenrick. I'll go to my panel in London first. Louise, what did you make of that interview?
Look, I thought that it was outrageous, really. When you think that Robert Jenrick is out there saying that we've got a serious plan to get rid of migrants, unlike the Tory plan, his is not thought through. You're going to push them back to France. Has he considered, and he obviously has not, that France supplies most of Britain's electricity? It's not really a question of, is our Navy better than their Navy? Yes, our Navy's better than their Navy, but if France wants to turn off the electric supply, they can. This is the kind of nonsense that Reform is peddling. They're taking people for fools. Only the Conservatives have got a real plan, which is to send people to Rwanda. Now, the reason that didn't work in the last government is that judges stopped it. We've already been clear. We're going to leave the EHCR, we're going to repeal the Human Rights Act, and we're not going to allow judges to interfere. That's joined up thinking. So, honestly, I think Robert Jenrick needs to come clean with the British people that Reform doesn't have a plan to send them back, and that's why they are floundering in the polls. Nigel Farage's approval ratings have absolutely cratered since he took £5 million and said I can spend it on Ferraris. People don't like that.
Louise, I would suggest, I agree with you. Offshore detention and processing is, in my opinion, the best way to solve this problem, and indeed that is the way that Australia solved this problem. But I would also suggest that the Tories had plenty of time pre their introduction of the Rwanda scheme to get this right, and they didn't. So I think there needs to be a level of circumspection in that regard. Stephen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have to say, it's a bit of a coup for GB News to get him on there, and fair play to you for that. But look,
I worked very hard to get that interview, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah, well, no, I respect. I always remember that Peter Mandelson's last outing when he was our ambassador in Washington was actually a GB News reception. So you've obviously got good contacts there. But look, here's a couple of things. I have to say, I hate to do this, Louise, but I utterly and totally disagree with you. Leaving the ECHR or abandoning the Human Rights Act would be absolutely irrelevant. It's British judges that make... And if you want to politicise the judiciary... If you want to actually go to the situation where we have political judges, then that's your choice. It's not my choice. However, let's get to this key point. He talked about the first 100 days. That's what they said about all the reform councils. The first 100 days, there's over a dozen councils, not a single change. What have they brought in that's a change? However, on this business about using the Royal Navy, Her Majesty's Royal Navy, there's not a single present or past serving officer, rating, Matlow, or anybody on the RN who could say for a minute that this would possibly work. Because if you actually have a frigate pulls up alongside it, they drop a rigid inflatable boat, the Royal Marines try to actually intercept it. What happens is they get a knife, they stick it straight into that, and the law of the sea says you then have to pick them up. And as for taking them back to France, you cannot invade, because that's what it would be, a foreign country's territorial waters when you're flying the white ensign. And so it's ill thought out and it's nonsensical. But the key thing is, Louise, immigration across Channel and overall is actually falling. If you look at what's happening now, the people smugglers, scumbags that they are actually operating on a 300-mile coastline. They're coming from Brussels, from Belgium, and they're trying to make crossings on 76 miles now because we are actually winning. We're deporting more people than ever, and cross-channel immigrants are down this year, they're down on last year, and they're down on the year before.
Stephen, that's like saying you're happy with a 6-1 loss in football because you got flogged 8-0 the season before. It's still not good, mate.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. But at least we're on the right track.
We're not on the right track.
We are.
We're allowing anybody to come in anytime we like. And when you say we wouldn't have political judges, it is the Human Rights Act that these judges are using to say you can't deport people to Rwanda.
It's advisory.
Because their daughter wets the bed, or this guy has a family life in the UK. If you get rid of that policy, we're not going to allow judges, whether they're right-wing or left-wing, to have any say whatsoever. That's the Conservative Party policy.
So you're politicising the judiciary?
No, we're not going to have
Yes,
the judiciary aren't going to have a say at all.
That's the road to dictatorship.
No judges blocking Conservative Party government policy, which is send them to Rwanda.
So Conservative judges.
And that will work.
Stephen, I think lefty international human rights lawyers have done a pretty good job of politicising the judiciary of late. I don't think this is something which is particularly new, but I'll go to Matt. Matt, excuse me. Another line which I thought was interesting is that Reform has personal relationships with the Trump administration, which means they would be able to strengthen diplomatic ties in a way that, say, Andy Burnham and the Labor government just could not. Do you think those sorts of personal relationships really matter when it comes to foreign diplomacy? And if so, do you think Reform is right in saying that they have an advantage there?
Well, I think relationships do matter. With that said, I think President Trump is willing to work with anybody. It just comes down to what the parties he's working with. You know, look, with Andy Burnham, I personally don't think Andy Burnham was off to a great start with President Trump when he, on the heels of his victory, made some comments talking about the dark age of politics. It's pointed to President Trump here in the United States. I don't think that's a good start by Andy Burnham. But you know, rhetoric is not what matters. It's the record of these politicians in Great Britain and the UK. And really, for Andy Burnham, for example, it's going to be what he does. And for Reform UK, it's going to be what is done. And, you know, look, I think President Trump wants to work with anybody who's willing to advance the causes that he believes are right, whether that's for the United States or for the freedom and opportunity for people around the world. And I think there's recognition among the Trump administration, without question, about the strong and important relationship we have between the United States and the UK. But there's no question that I think this administration was concerned about how Keir Starmer, the last prime minister, dealt with key things such as the Iran war and not being there for the United States as related to the Iran, or dealing with energy in the UK. You saw President Trump call out Keir Starmer for how he dealt with illegal immigration, crime, and energy. So I think Reform UK obviously is much more aligned with President Trump on a lot of these key issues, but ultimately it's about having a good partnership that advances a common cause. It's freedom and opportunity. That's what matters. And I think Reform, President Trump are aligned with that. But again, President Trump's willing to work with anybody.
Mally, final thought from you.
I think it's important to have a vivid imagination, but there's not going to be a general election anytime soon, so I don't think we're going to be having a reform government anytime soon. And in 2 years, the Trump administration is going to be done, and we're going to have a Democratic president. And this is coming at a nadir for reform. They have their leader, Nigel Farage, who accepted $5 million from a crypto billionaire and also accepted undisclosed money from a guy named Posh George, currently in a fight for his life with a guy who wears a trash can on his head.
Yeah, let's. I'd rather stick. Yeah, Mally, stop for a second. Mally, stop. I'd rather stick to the nature of the relationship between the UK and the US. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all I had. We can go to someone else.
No, that's fine. Well, a spokesperson from the Foreign Office has previously told GBNews the deal to secure the joint UK-US military base on Diego Garcia is crucial to the security of the UK and our key allies and to keeping the British people safe. The agreement we have reached is the only way to guarantee the long-term future of this vital military base. On defence spending, the Defence Secretary Wes Streeting has previously said the Prime Minister has said very clearly that the Defence Investment Plan must be fully funded. People will know how strongly the Chancellor John Healey feels about that because he resigned from the previous government on that very issue as a matter of principle. We will set out our spending plans in the usual way to not just outline what we're spending, but crucially how it will be funded. On illegal migration, this is what the Prime Minister Andy Burnham has previously said.
Overall, the number of crossings is down, the number of removals of people is up. So there is progress, but we both recognise that we need to do more.
Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
We inherited a prison system at capacity, and really difficult decisions have had to be made to release some prisoners early. I know the Lord Chancellor spoke with PC Harper.
The government has launched an urgent review over concerns grooming gang offenders could be released from prison early. But first tonight,
Andy Burnham's ambitions for Britain are too small.
The Conservatives want to evict foreign nationals from social housing, claiming hundreds of thousands of homes could be freed up. This is The Late Show Live on the People's Channel, GB News.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis,
In the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News breakfast is there.
with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some of what we would want to do in the fullest sense will require difficult decisions. To come back to the tax point, I will stick to the manifesto.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. The economist behind Reagan, Thatcher and Trump says Britain is taxing itself into decline. When will Andy Burnham listen? We'll get stuck into that shortly. But first tonight, breaking news. The Conservatives have announced that foreign nationals would lose their right to social housing if they were elected into government. They claim the move would free up around 230,000 homes, as under current rules, foreign nationals with settled status, refugee status or specific humanitarian protections can qualify for housing. With me now is Lotus Eaters presenter and political analyst, Josh Firm. Josh, great to see you. Big fan for a long time. First time we've got to chat. I am a foreign national. I would be embarrassed taking social housing in this country away from a citizen of the United Kingdom. This sounds like a sensible policy.
Well, I'm surprised it's taken this long, to be honest. It's been a long time coming, and I'm a little bit frustrated that it's got to the point now where this has been a long-running issue, and I believe I was running some numbers, actually, and the number of UK nationals in social housing is 89%. The number of refugees is 2.3%. And by process of elimination, unless there's a category I'm unaware of, that means that 8.7% are foreign-born people in our social housing. And currently there's a 1.8 3-4 million wait list for social housing, and this 230,000 figure, although it's certainly welcome, is only a very small drop in the ocean compared to the massive wait list. And of course, there are many different reasons for this. I know that the 2021 census suggested that there was 47.6% of people in London in social housing, which in and of itself is quite an offensive thing, because many working people can't afford to rent in London as is, let alone get a house on the back of the government. And of course, a disproportionate number of those are going to be foreign born. Because of the nature of London.
I got into a debate on this policy in the previous hour with a particular lefty, and they said, well, look, these people have paid their taxes, and after all, if you were to just kick them out, then what? How do you respond to that line of argument?
Well, I'm pretty sure the threshold to be a net tax contributor is if you earn about something in the realm of £44,000. That may well have changed since that figure was published, but there's a very large number of people in this country that are not earning that amount of money, that are foreign born, and one has to wonder why we're giving them free healthcare, free social housing, free welfare in all sorts of different ways. And the obvious solution here is, well, you're not British, so you should be deported if you're not a contributor to this country. It's the easiest solution. And the current social housing problem, people talk about it in terms of it being, oh, we just have to build more houses. But of course, we concrete over our beautiful countryside and also don't address the underlying problems, which are immigration and economic mismanagement, sort of combining to create a much larger problem here. And I think that that's the thing that is being overlooked here. What is actually needed is much more radical action. And although I'm glad to see it from the Conservatives, I think that they've had 14 years in power. Why is it coming now?
It's always the easy but accurate response to any Conservative policy at the moment is either you were the guys who messed it up or you had the chance to fix it and you didn't. And that's a particularly hard argument for Kemi Badenoch to get around. Josh, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go to the panel. Louise, I'll start with you. As I said, I am obviously not against targeted selective immigration. I would be a bit of a hypocrite if I was, but I think that you do need to satisfy two tests. I think you do need to be a net economic contributor to the country, and I think you need to come from a culturally compatible background. Now, this policy targets people who would not be net economic contributors, and I dare say there is a high correlation between those net economic detractors and also cultures that are not compatible with Western liberal democracy.
I don't know about the cultural thing. I think if you've got something to offer this country and you're going to be a net contributor from a culture that I would consider to be not perhaps best aligned with our values, if you're, for example, a brilliant heart surgeon from China and you want to come into Britain, then you are welcome. There's no problem there. What you're not going to get under the Conservatives is any kind of benefit or any kind of social housing. If we look at the rise of the far right over Europe and the populist parties, partly it is because people are absolutely fed up with seeing immigrants come into their country, take, and leap the queue, jump the line, as the Americans would say, for things like housing when there is a massive shortage. And I would also say it's not merely about justice, saying British homes for British people, which is what the Conservatives are saying. Everything in politics is a matrix. If you are going to offer more generous benefits than anywhere else in Europe, including free housing for immigrants who don't contribute anything to this country, you're going to get more immigrants. There is a reason that all those people in Calais don't want to stay in the safe, entirely protected nation of beautiful France. They want to come to England because English benefits are far, far too generous. So I think this is a brilliant policy by the Conservatives. And as for why we didn't do it before, it's because Kemi Badenoch wasn't leader. There's a reason that she is by far and away the most popular leader of any of the political parties. We're under new management. We've got new policies going back to our Thatcherite roots.
I think that's just about the best response that the Conservatives can come up with at the moment. I think that's fair. Stephen, is there any justification whatsoever for a foreign national to have social housing in this country if there are British citizens on the wait list?
Well, hang on a second. First of all, they don't. Let's get a couple of things absolutely straight. You do not have an entitlement to permanent housing unless you are a person who is a British citizen or has leave to remain. Not
so you're still a foreign national, Christine.
Yeah. Well, hang on a second. Where does that start? Boris Johnson was born in New York. I mean,
no, Stephen. He was a British citizen. We're not talking about that. Stick to the goalposts. We're talking about foreign nationals who have ILR.
Okay. Here's the reality. If we're talking about people who are temporary here while they're being assessed, then they do not get entitlement to any sort of permanent housing. They used to be in hotels, now
Stephen, we're talking about foreign citizens who have been in this country for 5 years and have indefinite leave to remain, but remain foreign citizens.
So I'm sorry, that's insane. You're saying that somebody who is a net contributor, who's settled status, who's on the road to getting British citizenship, is going to be thrown out of their council flat in Southwark because of some ill-thought-out, particularly unpleasant...
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, I'm sorry, that's insane. I don't think the British people would stand for that, not for a minute.
But how about the British people who are waiting for a house?
Yeah, well, no, absolutely, and build some more proper houses. Don't sell them all off like Mrs Thatcher did. But the interesting thing you did actually say about the idea of having an income threshold. Elvis Presley's parents had to move out of their house provided by the state when his earnings went to a certain level. And in New Zealand, they have a rule where you cannot be in social housing if your earnings have come to a certain level. Maybe that's the way forward. But coming up with this sort of, scapegoating people and saying we're going to chuck you out on the street, because we don't like the colour of your skin or where you come from, that's just, I'm sorry, that's vicious, unpleasant, corrosive and just plain nasty.
All right, well, I wasn't expecting Elvis to come into the conversation, but here we are. Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think unless you're a British citizen, then you should not be getting housing here. I mean, you don't. Look, the reality is you can't afford this, right? So, look, let's take a look at the numbers. Right now, the UK has £3 trillion in debt. You're running about 5% GDP in terms of your debt. That's insane. And so the bottom line here is you cannot afford this. And if I'm a citizen of the UK, what I'd be really upset about is where my taxpayer dollars are really going here. If they're going to immigrants who are not citizens of the UK for free housing, that's a major concern, particularly when you can't afford key things like prisons. I saw one report a couple of weeks ago that the UK may very well be letting out prisoners because they can't afford to build more prisons. The bottom line here is you just cannot afford this as a country. And thankfully here in the United States, President Trump has recognized that. He secured our border. He said, you know what, if you're an illegal immigrant or not a citizen of the U.S., you do not get to be participating in our benefits programs, whether it's housing, whether it's Social Security, whether it's healthcare programs. Unfortunately, we have Democrat candidates and politicians who want to put illegal immigrants in this country on government programs. That's wrong. Whether it's the United States or the UK, taxpayers, citizens, they want their dollars to go towards them and protecting their country. And the other part of this is national security. The larger part of this is the fact that you've had over 70,000 illegal immigrants cross on small boat crossings into your country. Immigration in general is a major concern, whether it's national security or whether it's the financial security of your country. When you're running $3 trillion in debt, you can't afford to do this.
Mally, quick word.
Well, two things. First off, President Trump didn't make it illegal for undocumented immigrants to be on government benefits. It was already illegal. That is simply not true. Second, when it comes to immigrants paying taxes, undocumented immigrants pay more in taxes than services they receive, but we're going to put that aside. On the housing front, I think, and I've told you this before, Will, the UK needs to build more housing. It is shameful how little housing you have, and I don't mean public housing, I mean market rate. You need to just let developers develop land and build apartment buildings, because what you're seeing here is the intersections of an immigration crisis and a housing crisis in the UK. Because even if you did this scheme, it's a drop in the bucket when it comes to the actual housing supply. And the only way you're going to fix the housing supply without spending more money, taxpayer money, is to just develop the land in areas you have and let builders build.
Well, on that, I largely agree with you. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm not looking to get into lawsuits, but I think I have an obligation to do it. This was so egregious.
President Trump's lawyers have just accused the BBC of exploiting his $10 billion lawsuit for political gain. But first tonight, all day GB News has been celebrating Britain by broadcasting from every corner of the UK, showcasing the people and places that make this country special. What do you love most about Britain? Let me know, gbnews.com/your say. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain is not just a geographical expression. We are a people bound together by history and culture that are distinctively British. Join me to celebrate our music, theatre, artworks and literature, which we can explore and enjoy together.
Everybody's welcome.
Sunday with Michael Portillo, every Sunday at 11 a.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless, and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. America's COVID czar-in-chief, Anthony Fauci, has been held in contempt after refusing to answer questions during a hearing last week. Why do you think he stayed silent? That's coming up shortly. But first, it's time to celebrate Britain. On a day when the People's Channel has celebrated Britain, I want to answer a question many GB News viewers and listeners have asked me. Why are you here? You could be on Bondi Beach right now, they say. You must be mad. One viewer even joked that I'd boarded the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. And I laughed, but I knew he was only half joking because everyone can see that Britain is at a low ebb. Still, I was born in Australia, the lucky country. I've lived in the United States, the shining light on the hill, and I love those two countries dearly. But my hope is to start a family and to grow old in Britain, because it remains, in my view, the greatest country the world has seen. Why? Well, it's the little things. It's a country walk through the mist. It's that first sip of a pint by a warm fire. It's boys' trips to Newcastle or a stroll through the British Museum. And it's the big things. It's the values that the country holds dear. And I'm not talking about universal progressive values that lefties rebadge as British values: tolerance, kindness, diversity and inclusion. I'm talking about those characteristics that elicit a small smile because you notice them because they are so distinctly British. English reserve, a stiff upper lip, understatement, manners, an appreciation for wit, a quiet nod that says, keep calm and carry on. And the most important thing that I feel deep in my bones when I stroll through the towns and villages of this country, it's the good fortune to be a very small part of a civilisational chain that stretches back thousands of years. Many great Australians are links in that chain, alongside Julius Caesar, Athelstan, Richard the Lionheart, Shakespeare, Lord Nelson, Churchill, Lennon and McCartney, Thatcher, and so many more. I feel like I'm part of something greater than myself living in Britain, in a way I haven't felt in any other part of the world. Many of us sense we are living in an age where that chain is at breaking point. We've got to fight to make sure that doesn't happen, and that's why days like today are so important. Stephen, what do you love about this country?
Pretty much everything, and I particularly love what it can be, because it can be an even greater country. But firstly, let's congratulate GB News on the 5 years. I mean, that's quite an achievement. And I think one of the things I love about this country is the freedom that we have to express our views, which is exemplified by the programme that we're actually here tonight. But look, a couple of things about, I think, I'm going to come as an absolutely irredeemable lefty on this one, but I do love the fact that we hold our patriotism quietly and modestly. We don't believe in actually wearing our heart on our sleeves, and we don't go flying flags in our front rooms. We actually have a bit of a modesty. But for me, one of the things that makes this country absolutely unique is every single weekend, between 13 and 15 million people, unpaid, actually go out and organise football matches for kids in the community, which is a glue that actually binds the community together. It's the volunteerism. I think the Britishness, it's don't make a fuss, it's offer your seat to somebody on the train, but it's also coming together for no reason other than you actually want to become a member of a community, whether you're helping the food bank or whether you're in your church or your social group, whatever. But the idea of that 15 million people every weekend for no payment, they're in parks and recreation grounds all over the country, and you'll see it in Australia, you maybe see it in America to a certain extent with the soccer mums. But for me, the idea that you can volunteer to make this country better and greater and actually hold the community together with that glue, that's what makes us British, and I'm damn proud of it. But also mentioning Lord Nelson, and for some of us, October 1805 is the most important date in British history, because that is the day when we actually established this modern country, this United Kingdom, because were it not for Lord Nelson, I hate to think where we'd be.
And I think also a reminder that we still should consider giving the froggies a good bashing every now and then, but maybe that's just me.
No, fair.
Louise, your thoughts?
They asked me to think of the thing I most love about this country, and I don't know, where do you start? Monty Python, the incredibly beautiful countryside all around us, the history of Britain. But if I had to pick one thing that I love about Britain above all other things, I think it would be courage. If you were to sum up our nation in a single word, it would be courage. Stephen talked about the Battle of Trafalgar, absolutely, but from Agincourt to Cressy to World War II to the Falklands, who knows, we've always been incredibly brave. When the Taliban sheltered Osama bin Laden, we alone were the first nation to fly, the very first night, flew sorties with our beloved cousins, the Americans, on day one of that war. We went into World War II years before the United States because we honoured our treaties at great cost to ourselves. Our word is our bond, and we are willing always to fight to protect it. And we do so with a light heart. We also invented gallows humour. We will pick up, we'll go forward, we'll run towards the sound of the gunfire, and we won't make a big fuss about it. We'll do it lightly, and we'll do it every single time. The British people are an ally that you can rely on always, and I'm incredibly proud to be British. It was once said that if you're born an Englishman, you win first prize in the lottery of life. Well, I was born an Englishwoman, and I think I've won joint first prize.
Yeah, I can still remember being at school asking somebody, by the way, sister, what language does God speak? I think you'll find English will actually do. But look, isn't it interesting that we're actually looking backwards? You remember John Major, the old maid cycling to Evensong through the mist and the warm beer? Let's not look back. Let's look forward to what this country can be. And I think with everything's going to change under AI. We are a country of innovators. We've invented so many things. I can talk for hours about all the things we've invented. So let's be at the forefront of technology, and let's look forward, because this country is great, but I happen to believe in my bones it can be even greater.
Matt, I think a lot of people, if our viewers are being realistic, would doubt that question. And again, I don't resolve from the fact that we often talk about the problems associated with Britain, because at the moment, Britain, as I said, I think is at a low ebb, and pretty much everyone would agree with me on that front. But at the same time, this is a country that has been great, that if it weren't for Britain, there would be no America, and that still has a huge amount to be grateful for and to be proud of.
Well, look, the thing I love most about Britain is that you love America and you love freedom, and
You'd be speaking
we
French.
certainly love you. You know, you've been a great ally of the United States, and you're right, Will. I mean, look, there are political differences here and there, but what unites us is truly, our love for freedom, for opportunity. And what really struck out to me during the FIFA World Cup was exactly that. I had the great honor to speak with a number of people from the UK, from Britain, and just wonderful discussions, but really discussions about how much they loved America and appreciated being here. And I want to thank GB News, because I think what you've done is really properly depict what the United States is all about. And I think you've done a great good in terms of strengthening our alliance and our relationship between the UK, between the United States. The British people, I think, recognize, like the people of the United States, that freedom matters, but also freedom is worth fighting for and protecting. And now more than ever, with the rise of socialism and communism that we're seeing, I really do think it's important that we stand up for freedom together. So look, there are political differences, but in the end, there's more that unites us than divides us. That's true. And certainly this great alliance and partnership is something that's worth fighting for. It's something we want to last. It's important to me and all citizens, I think, in the United States.
Mally?
I love many things about the UK, but two right off the bat is the UK has created some incredible writers. I could not have imagined my childhood without Tolkien's Lord of the Rings or J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. I think that's what subconsciously brought me to the UK for grad school at Cambridge. I needed to have my own Harry Potter Hogwarts experience, so I came to Cambridge. And then the second thing is just the depth of the UK's history. My college at Cambridge is the youngest college in the university, but it's older than America. So it just shows you the long history the UK has had, and hopefully many good years to come.
Yeah, well said. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen, the government's new social media curfew hasn't even started and teenagers are already planning to ignore it. Surprise, surprise. Is this proof that the government should mind its own business? But also on the show tonight.
They put me out and they have me saying, and you can't tell the difference, things that I never said.
President Trump's lawyers have just accused the BBC of exploiting his $10 billion lawsuit for political gain. What do you make of that? This is The Late Show Live, only on Britain's news channel, GB News.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there.
With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Let's delve into some of the main stories on the front of tomorrow's papers, and we will start with the front of the Times, which is reporting that a fifth of student loans now go to non-British citizens, risking billions for the taxpayer if they later leave the country and refuse to repay. Again, I sense a theme cutting across some of the problems that we are facing as a society today. Louise, this isn't just again about fairness, it's also about academic standards. And the problem here is if you just keep giving out all of these loans to foreign students, or indeed actually to students of this country who shouldn't be at university, you have to drop the standards in order basically for them to get the degrees and then order to them to leave and say you've ticked the box.
Yeah, and let's talk about student loans, because student loans are very difficult for people to repay, to be honest with you. And I find it amazing that we're giving these student loans to people that could just literally choose not to pay them back. That kind of thing jacks up the cost for everybody. My daughter's a British citizen. She's at university in Southampton right now. British citizen, born and bred, but because she came in from the United States, she has to pay foreigner-type fees, even though she's a dual citizen.
Seriously?
She's a British citizen.
That's insane.
It's insane. If we were to saddle her with a loan that she'd have to pay back, that loan would be jacked up because we are giving away loans to foreign students who come in and literally don't have to repay them. And by the way, the statistics on foreign students that don't pay back those loans are horrific. Why would you pay back a loan when you literally don't have to? You can go back to France or Eritrea or wherever you come from and you don't have to pay back the loan and nobody will come after you for it. This can't go on. And really, the amount of money that we waste in this country on paying for foreigners to have benefits and gain advantages that British people can't get is ridiculous.
So on
the Tories are going to put an end to it.
On that, the Times are saying you are 25% less likely on average as a foreign student to repay your loan, which means that the taxpayer in the UK would have to foot somewhere between 1.2 billion and 2.2 billion.
Well, hang on a second. Every university in the Russell Group, the top 10 universities in this country, spend half their life begging people to come here from China, from Indonesia, from Pakistan, from India, from Australia, begging people to come over here. Half of our universities actually rely on people. And don't forget, we've benefited massively. You think about all the number of Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany who came and revitalised our scientific progress, and all the doctors, the people we've got now, particularly in life sciences and AI, the number of people from the Far East, incredibly helpful. But the bottom line is you don't actually get a student loan if you're an overseas student. You get charged an overseas student fee. You can apply for a bursary from the university, but you don't get the automatic grant if you're an overseas student. But you just don't get it.
But Stephen, that's just literally not true. They've just said that 25% of people who are overseas students who do get these loans don't repay them. If they couldn't get loans, there wouldn't be a problem with them repaying them. The reason that we wanted foreign students to come in is because they charge a higher fee.
Exactly.
That's fine.
So who pays
but then
that?
they should not get foreign loans, should they? I think you agree with me. They shouldn't be getting
But Louise,
student loans.
who pays that higher fee?
Stephen, you're literally arguing against the facts here. About 1 in 5 student loans are now being given to non-British citizens, and that is going to cost statistically somewhere between 1 and 2 billion. But unfortunately, I'm not going to give you a right of reply because we don't have any time left. There's more coming up in the next hour, including this.
I watched them this morning for some crazy reason, and it was so inaccurate. Their reporting on the war was unbelievable. We have decimated that country, and if you watch BBC, it's almost like they're fighting us to a draw.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain is not just a geographical expression. We are a people bound together by history and culture that are distinctively British. Join me to celebrate our music, theatre, artworks and literature, which we can explore and enjoy together.
Everybody's welcome.
Sunday with Michael Portillo. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Live from London, England, on a day where we are celebrating this great country. This is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. And a GB News exclusive from the White House to the Pentagon. Reform UK has spent the day building ties with Trump's America. Robert Jenrick joined us from Washington, DC earlier.
3,000 illegal migrants are being removed from the United States every day at the moment. And we've been very clear we want to see every single illegal out of the UK.
Elsewhere, panorama payback. President Trump's lawyers have just accused the BBC of exploiting his $10 billion lawsuit for political gain.
I'm not looking to get into lawsuits, but I think I have an obligation to do it. This was so egregious.
And early release outrage, justifiably so. The government has launched an urgent review over concerns that rape gang offenders could be released from prison early. But will excuses like this wash anymore?
Inherited a prison system at capacity, and really difficult decisions have had to be made to release some prisoners early.
Not with me, they won't. Elsewhere, tax trap. The economist behind Reagan, Thatcher and Trump says Britain is taxing itself into decline. When will the country wake up and listen?
Some of what we would want to do in the fullest sense will require difficult decisions. To come back to the tax point, I will stick to the manifesto.
And the heir to the MAGA throne, President Trump, has reportedly told donors whom he will be supporting as the next presidential nominee. But after seeing some of the polling for Marco Rubio, he might be asking this yet again.
Thrilled to be joined by a proud Marine Corps veteran Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D.? Where's J.D.? What the hell happened to J.D.?
And all day, GB News has been celebrating Britain by broadcasting from every corner of the country, showcasing the people and places that make this country special. What do you love most about Britain? I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome back to The Late Show Live for another hour, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for staying with us. And indeed, thank you very much to my panel. We have former Conservative MP Louise Mensch, former Labor MP Stephen Pound, and in Washington, D.C., former Chief of Staff to Marco Rubio, Matt Terrell, and Democratic strategist Mally Smith. Thank you once again, team. Let's go to a GB News alert. Donald Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC has taken another twist, with the US president's lawyers accusing the broadcaster of trying to use the case for its own political gain. And in a further twist, the president has secured a minor victory in his legal battle against the BBC after a judge delayed a deadline for him to hand over his company's financial details. With me now is defamation law attorney Trey Lovell. Trey, great to see you. Bring me up to speed with the case.
Yeah, so it seems what happens now is Trump is trying to delay providing the financial records, saying that there's still some issues in dispute, whether it's not with the judge or the appellate court. And certainly this First Amendment complaint that they believe will change everything. And they just want the court to delay ordering the production to allow this other side to kind of go through this process. And the court agreed. So they're going to hold off, stay the production, and see where this First Amendment complaint leaves them and then where the issues are.
So I'm clear. Trump is accusing the BBC of exploitation for asking for his financial records, which potentially they could then use against him as part of a political agenda?
Yeah, so the BBC wants to get at the heart of what Trump's damages are. Trump is claiming that as a result of the defamatory documentary that he claims is defamatory, that he suffered $10 billion in damages. And one of the measures of that is, you know, how your economics are, your businesses are, and how much money you're making and your businesses are making. So the BBC wants to take a look at that to see if he's really lost money. And it's certainly a valid point. It goes to the heart of what the claims are, and that's what they're trying to get at.
And this is the question that I have, because in my personal opinion, and indeed most sensible people, what the BBC did from a journalistic perspective was unconscionable. But in order to try to establish damages, when Trump is the best known person in the world, and people have largely already made up their minds on Trump in one way or another, I imagine proving damages, and particularly to that quantum, would be very difficult.
You're 100% accurate. That's exactly right. You know, what the BBC did was not right. It was horrendous. But the question is, did it damage Trump? And of all the things that have been said negatively about Trump over the last 3 or 4 decades, and certainly since he's become president, you know, to claim that this one documentary that nobody really saw in the United States, wasn't broadcast in the United States, somehow caused him all this damage that all these other things over the years did not, is very dubious. You know, and the BBC striking at that. They want to get at the heart of that to start proving that it's not true. And on its face, it is questionable. But since it's a lawsuit and discovery is allowed and the BBC is allowed to test the damages claims, you know, they need to get to those records and see what happened.
There's a question that I have in defamation cases like this, and it's about the Streisand effect, which is basically when a particular celebrity wants to try and take up issue with something which they believe to be damaging about them. They make a big deal of it, and in the end, it becomes far more public and far more well-known than what it otherwise would have. And it goes back to an instance of that with Barbara Streisand. Does that play into defamation cases at all, where the judge or the jury may potentially say, by bringing this case, you brought it into the spotlight more than it otherwise would have been, or is that irrelevant?
No, it's very relevant. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things I tell all my clients who want to consider suing somebody over defamation. I said, you got to realize you're going to be repeating the defamatory statements. You're going to put it in court. More people are going to hear about it than they have thus far. So the question is, you know, how far has it gone so far? Can you live with it? Or are you so damaged and so steadfast that you want to pursue it, but just knowing that now it's going to reach some ears and eyeballs that otherwise it wouldn't reach. And so I don't think the court's going to really judge in that way, if somebody's allowed to bring a lawsuit for redress for defamatory claims, and the court's going to allow them to do that. But from a practical perspective, if something's defamatory about yourself, you don't want anybody to know about it. And certainly you want the distribution and the publication of it limited. But when you file a lawsuit, when it gets media coverage, it's going to expand beyond what was normally and initially heard. So you are exactly right. That's one of the major considerations I tell all my clients, and most defamatory plaintiffs have to consider, in terms of whether or not they want to file a lawsuit.
Interesting. Trey, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go to the panel. I'll start in DC on this one, and I'll go to you first, Mally. Again, I think we would all agree that what the BBC was a dereliction of journalistic ethics. But at the same time, my question would be, do you think it is right for Donald Trump to have spent time and money pursuing this defamation case?
Well, I think you know the answer to that is a no. And here's the thing. Did the BBC make a mistake? Sure, it definitely made a mistake. The way it edited the documentary was wrong. But there's a few things here. First off, I think President Trump and his legal team got a false sense of confidence because they sued a lot of media organizations, and those media organizations in the U.S. settled those cases with Trump. But they settled those cases not because they thought they couldn't win on the legality of them. They settled those cases because their corporate entities had business with the Trump administration, and they didn't want to get on the wrong side of the Trump administration. Specifically, sorry, CBS, I hope you have me on again. Paramount had a merger case up with the Trump administration and needed the DOJ's approval. There's a reason they settled and paid out Trump. Similar with ABC. But the thing is, BBC doesn't have the same financial entanglements in the U.S. that these corporate media companies in the U.S. have. So they don't have the incentive to settle. And also, once you get into the lawsuit, regardless of who wins or not, if you go down that road, as your guest was saying, discovery is a two-way street, and it's going to be painful for the BBC if the Trump team is able to get emails from BBC staffers who potentially, I'm sure, will have said negative things about Trump. And then the BBC itself can get Trump's financial records and emails from folks within Trump's inner circle that can embarrass him. So I keep thinking there has to be an off-ramp where the BBC puts out a slightly stronger apology and maybe pays him a little, not what he wants, but they both have a reason to get out of this.
Yeah, Matt, is there any chance that this lawsuit could actually backfire on Trump if he does have to reveal information that ultimately could be damaging?
No, I don't think that that's going to be the case here. I think President Trump isn't looking at it through that lens. I think he looks at things through one main lens, and that is justice. When he feels that there's a wrong, particularly against him, he wants justice, and anyone else would. And I think the question here is what's to stop the BBC from doing this again? If you don't launch a lawsuit, what does it stop them from doing this again? That's the big question. So I think he's got every right, of course, to do this lawsuit. I think it's the right move, actually. But let's just put the lawsuit aside and the financial component of this aside for a moment and talk about the election. Because people have to remember the timeline in which this documentary was aired. It was aired just a few days before the 2024 presidential election. And yes, there are some U.S. citizens, although probably not many, who watch the BBC in the United States. There's also many U.S. citizens who live in the U.K., who still vote in a U.S. election, who may watch the BBC. The bottom line here is, how did that documentary impact the 2024 general election? Now, thankfully, President Trump won. But
I think that's a bit of a stretch, mate.
Pathway there that you got to look at.
I worked in the presidential campaign with Harris. I've worked in every presidential campaign of the last 3 cycles. I can tell you this BBC documentary did not reach anybody, and it was not some big game.
Well, you can't say it didn't reach anybody. You can't say it didn't reach anybody. Somebody,
whatever.
Let's just say a couple of thousand people saw it. The bottom line is
1,000 people probably didn't see it.
Well, how do you know that, Mally? How do you know that? You don't know that.
It didn't air. The BBC has admitted it didn't air in the U.S. And whatever nerd
people
was
can't
watching
look at it
the
online?
BBC in Florida.
But that's not the point. The point is, was it right or wrong? And back to the lawsuit, because that's what we're talking about here. President Trump had a big wrong against him. And the question is, I think in his eyes, I suspect, I want to speak for him, is if you don't do this, What's to stop the BBC from doing it again? It seems like the BBC does a lot of wrongs and always gets away with it. And that's just not just for the BBC. It's for a lot of people in the media. I don't think President Trump doesn't need any more money. He's got a lot more money than all of us combined on this panel. The bottom line here is I don't think it's about the finances of it. I think it's about justice. And, you know, the question is, if you don't do this, what's the pathway to justice?
If he doesn't need any more money, why does he have a cryptocurrency that he is currently pursuing as president? If he doesn't need any money, why is he selling Bibles? If he doesn't need any money, why is he doing all of these things?
This lawsuit's not about the money, I don't think. I really don't. Not to talk over you, Will. I'll just finish by saying this. I think it's about justice at the end of the day. I really do.
Okay, I know your point, Mally, but I just want to stay on the BBC here because I never miss a chance to give them a good kicking. Louise, I would suggest if the BBC had done their job, GB News probably wouldn't exist. But the fact that they haven't done their job is the reason now that GB News is the top-rating news channel in the country. So I do have some sympathy with Matt's point that says, you know what, there needs to be accountability for the BBC to breach journalistic standards so egregiously.
There does, but it's not going to happen through this lawsuit. And if I were President Trump's lawyers, I certainly wouldn't have said as my objection that the BBC is going to gain political advantage by going through my financial records, because that's more or less a statement that if the BBC goes through these financial records, they're going to find something dodgy, as we would say over there in Britain. I certainly wouldn't have admitted that whatsoever. I think President Trump has wisely tonight said that he's going to drop the part of his suit that claims that his businesses were impacted by this. And I would say to Matt, if I were the president, I would look at my own success. That's something that President Trump is very keen on. He's a very successful businessman. He won the election convincingly. He's become a lot more wealthy since the election. It's going to be really hard for him to show financial difficulties. Now, did the BBC do something wrong? Absolutely. They spliced two things of President Trump's together that he didn't say at the time. And I was one of the people, I'm a dual citizen, I was one of the Americans that actually believed that he'd said, let's march down this hill and attack the Capitol because the BBC said it. I will admit that I did it. So what the BBC did was outrageous. But the justice that President Trump should seek, if I were advising him, I would ask him, I would demand a really fulsome statement of apology and admission of total wrongdoing and journalistic malpractice. He's not going to get the monetary settlement that he wants, but he should get justice.
Did it change your vote, by the way?
But
no.
Go ahead.
No. Look, I think that's an interesting insight. Stephen, to you?
Yeah, look, apparently this case actually turns on whether people in Florida actually saw the programme or not. But look, I'm not a huge expert on United States defamation law. It's not something I studied at great length. But it seems to me that the BBC have actually done the right thing. There used to be a statement in the BBC, if they did anything wrong, they used to say, well, deputy heads must roll. What's happened is the Director General left. There's been a complete clear out at the upper levels of the BBC, and to be honest, the BBC will never ever recover from that particular lapse of journalistic standards. No question about that. And when it comes up to the renewal of their charter next year, that will certainly be a factor in it. So what the BBC have actually done, that I think we can all agree on that. They took two statements that he did actually make. They spliced them together to look as though they were consequential, which they clearly weren't. But the reality is that at the present time, as in Iran, you think, dear God, where's the off-ramp? Because I don't see where this can go. He can just spin it up for as long as he can until maybe at the end of it he gets some sort of presidential pardon, who knows. But at the present time, the BBC have done wrong. They've fessed up, they've held their hands up, they've sacked the governor, the team who actually made the programme have all gone, and I hope this is a wake-up call for them.
I should add to Louise's early remarks, I imagine Donald Trump would dispute that if you were to look into his financial records, you would find anything dodgy. I personally don't have $10 billion lying around, so I can't afford a lawsuit. Mally, we've got to move on, unfortunately. On the issue of the BBC splicing a clip of President Trump, the broadcaster said it sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, but added that they strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
Some of what we would want to do in the fullest sense will require difficult decisions. To come back to the tax point, I will stick to the manifesto.
The economist behind Reagan, Thatcher and Trump. I'd suggest all had quite different economic ideologies, but in any case, we'll get to this. He says that Britain is taxing itself into decline. When will Andy Burnham listen? But also tonight, the government's new social media curfew hasn't even started and teenagers are already planning to ignore it. I'm shocked. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News. But first, Andy Burnham's government is urgently identifying any rape gang leaders who could be freed early from prison under the government's early release scheme. The Prime Minister has asked the Ministry of Justice to conduct an in-depth review to ensure rape gang cases were identified after Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch highlighted that indecent assault, an offence used to convict child sex offenders in a historical rape gang case in Bradford, was not included in the list of offences the government was excluding from the scheme.
Labour have been too slow to do this. Andy Burnham has been too slow. I put an amendment down on legislation to stop the release of rapists and paedophiles. Labour MPs voted against it. They're only doing this now because of the pressure which I and others, Conservatives and others, have been putting on them, and we will continue to do so. We do not want to see the early release of killers. I'm glad that the government wants to stop the release of rapists, but they need to get on with it, not just talk about it.
About 5,000 prisoners are expected to be released early under sentencing changes in England and Wales to reduce overcrowding in jails. With me now is former Conservative Minister Kevin Foster. Kevin, great to see you once again. I was saying to an earlier guest that Kemi Badenoch is in a difficult position as a leader because pretty much everything she says can be responded to with either, well, you guys messed it up, or you guys had the chance to fix it and you didn't. And here, what she's saying, I wholeheartedly agree with, and well done for pointing this out. But at the same time, the Conservatives had the chance to bring forth a rape gang inquiry and they didn't.
Well, let's remember many of the prosecutions and people are actually in jail because of work that was done under the Conservative government in terms of setting up a prosecution task force to actually start bringing people to justice. Where this specific issue, though, goes back to is how actually you've got people who committed offences actually before 2003. So the offence you're charged with for historic allegations is indecent assault before more modern grooming legislation was brought in, but have then been convicted in recent years of those crimes. So if someone had been convicted back in 2003 of indecent assault, it's very likely they would have already completed their full sentence by now. Whereas it's those now being convicted as part of this historic inquiries, because one of the key issues of grooming gangs, and thankfully media organisations like GBNews now exist, is the fact that at the time, 20-odd years back, the first warnings of a lot of this were ignored.
Yeah, I agree. Kevin, this is a question I've asked several times on this channel. I still haven't got an answer which is satisfactory. I don't understand with a prison early release scheme why the first step wouldn't be looking at all of the range of different criminal offences from least serious to most serious and then saying, right, we're going to start with the least serious criminal offences if we absolutely have to release people. You know, petty shoplifting or any sort of crimes related to what you say online, or maybe non-violent white-collar crime, and you release all of those first, and then you don't release the really, really bad violent ones. But it doesn't seem like that segmentation exercise has taken place. Why not?
Well, a lot of the people you're talking about, for example, let's talk about shoplifting and theft. Those who actually end up in jail for that are more likely to be the sort of person who's an absolute nightmare for a local community, i.e. someone who's constantly committing criminal offences, probably doing minor violent offences whilst they're at it as well. So in many cases, a lot of people you just list wouldn't actually be going to prison anyway. So therefore, they're not actually there available to be released early, or there's someone who's such a repeat offender that actually you put them in jail as the courts actually give a community a break from them and their regular
Well, how about then, sorry to interrupt you, but then we just say all non-violent criminals should take priority in early release before any violent criminals are considered?
Yeah, I must say I wouldn't object to that idea. I think there's been, for example, suggestions that whilst the female population is much smaller than the male population in prison, actually the vast majority of women are not in prison for violent or sexual offences. And therefore you could actually look at options there in terms of freeing up capacity first before you start looking at releasing violent men. And the numbers in prison, we're talking about 90,000 is the capacity of our prison system. That did increase between 2010 and 2024. Also, of course, some older prisons were replaced during that time that come effectively to the end of their useful lives as places of custody. So that's where a lot of this comes down to, is actually those men who are going to jail generally are people going to jail for violent or more serious acquisitive crime offences, i.e. serious drug dealers, those who've stolen very large amounts of money, and where the view is you do actually need to keep them in jail to have any form of deterrent. But where Andy Burnham's finding is it's quite easy to, as an opposition, as perhaps in the mayor, to say, well, I don't like this this type of system. As the Prime Minister, he's actually got to find solutions. And we also, and it's a famous one, is we also need to speed up our planning process, because one of the things that takes a long time to build is actually get planning permission for prisons like anything else. It's something else we need to review.
Yeah, indeed we do. Kevin, thank you very much for your time, as always. Let's go to the panel now. Louise, I'll start with you. Again, we've talked about the difficulty that Kemi faces when there are problems which undoubtedly either originated or were exacerbated under the Conservative government, and this is one of those. I don't think even the most ardent Conservative supporter would say that they left the prison system in the shape that it needs to be, particularly with particular crimes growing in parts of the country. Where do you stand on this?
Look, I think you just heard from Kevin, we made improvements to the prison estate. They obviously weren't big enough improvements, and we are where we are. But there is really no point in saying, oh, well, Kemi can't come forward with new policies because Boris Johnson didn't do it and Rishi Sunak doesn't do it. I mean, that's just nonsense. She's in charge of the Conservative Party now. She's a Thatcherite through and through, and she will get things done. I do think that we should be releasing non-violent offenders, particularly women that aren't going to do much harm, and keeping those violent and sexual offenders in jail. For example, if you are a paedophile and you haven't actually committed violence, but you have traded indecent images of children, I would count that as somebody that should stay in prison for life, or serve every single day of their sentence. You have to be careful when you say nothing but violent people should be released. But ultimately, what Labour should be doing is not having a review to find out who the grooming cases gangs are. I could find that out for them. Give me half an hour and Google, and I will find every grooming gang case that has come up in the last 20 years. This isn't difficult. I don't know why they're making it sound so difficult. Of course these people can't be let out. And Kemi is once again leading the pack. She put down an amendment and Labour are once again following her lead and saying, oh, sorry, we didn't realise that, so now we'll have a review. It's not good enough. Andy Burnham had a long time plotting against Keir Starmer to become Prime Minister. He should have got this sorted out before he came into office. The best thing you can say about this is better late than never.
Stephen, there is a perception amongst the British public, and I think it is a fair perception, that this Labor government don't care enough about the rape gang atrocity. It starts with referring to it as a far-right dog whistle. It then continues with Keir Starmer having to be dragged kicking and screaming to an inquiry. This can't help the perception that this government doesn't really care about this, or what I think is the greatest tragedy in modern British history.
That's a horrendous insult to a huge number. I'm sorry, it is a horrendous insult.
It's not.
Don't forget the first time.
I'm not going to take that gaslighting, Stephen. They had to be dragged kicking and screaming to this inquiry. They didn't care nearly enough for far too long. I'm sorry, that is not absolutely
We had the independent inquiry on child sexual abuse under the
of which the grooming gangs were a footnote of a footnote. It was not the purpose of that inquiry.
Can I say, 25 years ago, Anne Cryer, the Labour MP, raised this issue, and she was absolutely damned from all sides of the House. Nobody seemed to take it seriously. This is a national crisis. It's a national shame for all of us. It's not just the question of the Labour Party or the Conservative. Nobody took it seriously. But look, the situation we've got in now is that it's not just the prison estate, it's actually crumbling. And as Kevin Foster, and it's nice to see Kevin again, by the way, but to have 90,000 people in England and Wales in prison, twice the size of the Royal Navy. And when I was in Dartmoor prison as a prison officer, which is not for a very long time, admittedly, they actually had to close Dartmoor because of radioactive gas coming up through the ground. And yet there's 4 prisons are being built today, and every single one of them is being held up because of problems in the sclerotic planning system. Now, wouldn't it be a real absolute goal for Nigel Farage to say, I've got 12 councils here, reform councils, we're going to identify the piece of land, we're going to actually sort out the local concerns, and we're going to build a prison with Home Office money. He could do that overnight.
Louise, I want to get your thoughts on the way that Stephen characterised my comments on the rape gangs.
Look, I don't think that he was being fair, but what do you expect a former Labour MP to do? He's going to defend his party. He's right about Anne Cryer. I remember her taking the lead, and she was perhaps the first person to blow the whistle. She was, but that doesn't excuse Labour's inaction. And I'm afraid to say that all the worst and most egregious cases of grooming gangs happened on Labour's watch, under Labour councils, and it was Labour councils and Labour governments that covered it up and then blamed racism for looking at the fact that they were mostly, in fact, fact, almost totally Pakistani origin nationals running grooming gangs. Kemi Badenoch isn't cut from that cloth. And I think it's fair to say that it's not just party political. When Rupert Lowe of Restore had his grooming gangs inquiry, the Conservatives attended every single day of that inquiry. Labour did not. This really should be something that all parties can come together over, but it isn't.
Yeah.
When we're accused of racist dog whistles, it just, honestly, it destroys trust in politics. And Labour have got to get their act together, and they've got to do it quickly. The Conservatives shouldn't be leading on this from the opposition benches, but I'm afraid we're going to have to do the job that Andy Burnham won't do.
Yeah, many people would suggest, and I think it is a reasonable inference, that one of the reasons why Labor is reticent to do this sort of inquiry is because of their political ideology. If you look into this deep enough, the whole multiculturalism project crumbles, but also because they are desperate to try and capture the Muslim vote in this country, and they see that as a threat. So I'm not going to
lost the Muslim
so I'm not going to cop gaslighting from Labor MPs.
Sorry, the Muslim vote is not Labour's anymore.
Yeah, well, they're desperate to try and get it back, and they know they
that's
need
a different
it,
story.
and they know that they need it. Matt, I'll go to you.
A review. There shouldn't need to be a review. You should just hold the line on ensuring those who've committed heinous crimes, whether that's rape or whether that's heinous murders, those are individuals who, should not be released early. And so, the bottom line here is we've seen this here in the United States. You had Governor Walz up in Minnesota, a Democrat. You may remember that he was Vice President Harris's running mate. He in fact signed off on having an individual who's a legal immigrant who was in prison, who was in prison for sexually assaulting a young girl. He signed off on his early release. I think that was wrong. Thankfully, President Trump deported that individual from the country. President Trump held the line. You have to hold the line on ensuring that these individuals who commit heinous acts are not out in the open, because guess what? They may commit those heinous acts again. That's the truth. And the other concern I have, and I talked about it earlier in the show, is just the overcrowding in your prison system. The fact that you're spending more money on housing for immigrants than you are on building new prisons is insane. That's a real problem in the UK. I saw one report, as I mentioned, up to 6,000 prisoners may be released early. We'll see if that actually happens in the UK. But one thing you could do is get more foreign nationals out of your prisons. Why are there roughly 12% of your prisons having foreign nationals in your prisons? These are all concerns that I think the people of the UK have, whether it's with overcrowding your prisons, not building new prisons, or early release for individuals who've committed heinous acts. It's absolutely insane policies. It's something you have to have leaders hold the line on.
Yep.
Those who committed rape, murder, other heinous acts need to be in prison.
Mally, I imagine for the Democrats this must also be a concern, because the rise of the Democratic Socialists, basically, who I would suggest aren't a particularly big fan of prisons, and I would suggest are not considered to be hard on crime, quite the opposite. There must be a concern amongst more sensible Democrats that they will be vulnerable on this issue.
Sure, I think the abolish police or abolish ICE, that rhetoric is counterproductive, and we shouldn't obviously abolish police. We have to have a strong police force in the United States. We're going to have some form of immigration enforcement, even if I believe that ICE has overstepped its bounds and we need to reform it. On the specific question when it comes to the UK, look, as a Democrat, I would rather spend money on other things, but you guys need to build more prisons. And I think there's a through line of a lot of my comments with the UK right now is Britain needs to build. You guys need to build housing, and you guys need to build some more prisons, because I'm with Luis on you need to release it's okay to potentially release or think about releasing non-violent criminals, but what you shouldn't have is that you're releasing criminals at duress because you're at such a straining point you don't know what to do when you have someone newly convicted and you don't have anywhere to put them, and that means you're going to have to put someone else out who potentially is dangerous. That is not a system that is workable.
Agree. Let's take a quick look now at some of the other main news in America. European teams could still boycott competitions, including the World Cup, as UEFA say FIFA's defence of its president Gianni Infantino changes nothing. The FA has sent a letter withdrawing its support for Infantino in reaction to the plan to sell off stakes in the World Cup to private investors. And President Donald Trump has dismissed reports that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth could be replaced, calling the claims false and completely unfounded in a Truth Social post. Trump's statement comes after reports questioned Hegseth's future at the Pentagon amid scrutiny over the administration's handling of military operations. And President Trump has signed 2 executive orders that the White House said aims to restrict eligibility for birthright citizenship and ban birth tourism. The orders come just over a month after the United States Supreme Court rejected Trump's first attempt to restrict the guarantee of birthright citizenship enshrined in the US Constitution. And finally, US Senator Mitch McConnell has been discharged from a rehabilitation centre and will continue to recover at home. The 84-year-old Kentucky Republican was admitted to hospital in mid-June after experiencing a fall and a mild case of pneumonia. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, President Trump has reportedly told donors whom he will be supporting as the next presidential nominee. But first tonight,
some of what we would want to do in the fullest sense will require difficult decisions. To come back to the tax point, I will stick to the manifesto.
the economist behind Reagan and Thatcher says Britain is taxing itself into decline. When will Andy Burnham listen? This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome to your GB News weather update, coming to you from the Met Office. Now, there is some rain again across northern parts of Scotland today, but further south it's another dry day with lots of sunshine on offer. We just need to watch out for a few showers across western parts of England and Wales at the moment. They will push a little bit further eastwards this morning before largely fizzling out. So then by the afternoon, mostly dry for England, Wales, Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland. Much wetter across central and northern parts of Scotland with some blustery winds as well. Temperatures are generally going to be up a degree or so compared to yesterday in the southeast. We're looking at highs of around 25 or 26 Celsius. High teens, perhaps low 20s for some parts towards the north. There's more wet weather to come across northern Scotland through the end of the day. We are going to see some relatively high rainfall totals building up through today and into tomorrow, particularly around the northern and western Isles and the Highlands as well. Central, southern, eastern parts of Scotland drier here with a largely fine end to the day across Northern Ireland, and for England and Wales a fine picture too. Lots of clear skies through this evening, so some late sunshine, yes, but with that clear sky we are going to see temperatures taking a bit of a drop overnight, away from the northwest where it stays quite cloudy and there will be some rain. Even across parts of Northern Ireland, cloud will push in as we head towards dawn and we could see a bit of rain arriving here. Otherwise, yes, with that dry, clear weather, it is going to be a fresh night. Some rural spots in England and Wales could get as low as 4 or 5 Celsius tonight, so perhaps even a bit chilly for some of us first thing tomorrow morning. Then through tomorrow itself, yes, a fresh start to the day, but again, lots of sunshine across England and Wales. Further north and west for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, a cloudier picture. The heaviest, most persistent rain still across northern and western parts of Scotland, with those totals continuing to build up. In the southeast, it's going to be hotter than today. We're seeing temperatures back in the high 20s. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Tonight, we are celebrating Britain and 5 years of the People's Channel. What 5 years it's been. It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys and I am live from the epicentre of the Calais migrant crisis tonight. OK. It's incredible to think that there's so many tents here. I mean, I can't even begin to suggest how many there are.
I'm at the North Shields Fishing Quay and it's a beautiful day. And I'm finding out whether Brexit has been a plus or a negative.
This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Well, in just a few minutes, the polls will close and you will have decided who gets the keys to number 10.
I have spent the day at the unlikely epicentre of Britain's political earthquake.
Please welcome your host, Nigel Farage. We'll be talking Middle East, we'll be talking banking.
Today marks the start of a new era in British politics.
Well, the budget, it's gone down pretty badly.
President Donald Trump. The interview.
Thank you, Ben.
We decided that we wanted to smash the gangs. I'm Patrick Christys, I'm from GB News. You are a human trafficker, aren't you?
Are there?
Yes.
Hello, good evening, it's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, live from Somerset with State of the Nation tonight.
Hello.
How many new homes have been built since Labour took power?
I don't have the exact. I'm not Wikipedia. No, I'm not Wikipedia.
No,
I'm here to talk to you about policy.
And I'm joined in Westminster by a farmy army.
So who does he look like then?
Okay.
Oh, well,
Think he's got the ginger tinge?
A fat rind face.
Look at that order. Come on, again. Oh, that's my slam. Here we go. Oh, hello. Hope you saw that live on GB News.
President Trump has arrived in Britain for his historic second state visit to the United Kingdom.
Hello and welcome to Crowborough. Get ready, because the most exciting night in general election history starts now! I do actually want to say a big thank you. You have made GB News the #1 news channel in the country.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. One of America's leading economists has called for the Prime Minister to slash a range of taxes in the October budget to boost Britain's economy. Arthur Laffer, you may have heard of the Laffer curve, has been an advisor to Reagan, Thatcher and Trump, and he told The Times that he's baffled by the complexity of the UK's tax system and advised the PM to cut the top rate of income tax to encourage back wealthy expats and scrap inheritance tax and stamp duty. Well, with me now is former aide to Margaret Thatcher, friend of the show, Niall Gardner. Niall, great to see you. Niall, I said this on one of the shows recently. They're all blurring together at the moment, but I'm sick and tired of being governed by economic illiterates who don't understand how economies grow. And they keep thinking that we can just keep borrowing and borrowing, and then the government will use euphemisms like investment to just spend on whatever flights of fancy they wish. And they don't seem to understand, as Laffer did, as Thatcher did, that the way you grow an economy is by reducing tax and reducing regulation.
Yes, absolutely, Will. Great to see you. And actually, I first met Arthur Laffer decades ago when I worked for Margaret Thatcher. And he's still actually working today full-time. He's 85 years old, but he's still doing a full-time job. And the advice that he's giving to Andy Burnham, I think, is absolutely the right advice. It's to cut taxes, reduce regulation, free the British people from the shackles of big government and advance economic freedom. This is exactly the right message, I think, that Burnham needs to hear. Now, whether or not Burnham actually follows through is another matter altogether. But the reality is that in recent years, a large number of high-wealth British entrepreneurs, businessmen and so on have left the country as a result of rising taxes. And the top tax rate in England and Wales, I think, is now around 45%. In Scotland, it's 48%. And this is leading to an exodus of high wealth talent from Britain, and it's reducing job creation, it's reducing wealth creation in the UK. And so Arthur Laffer's advice is absolutely the right advice, I think, for the British government, for the British people. Britain needs more economic freedom, which has been under growing threat, it has to be said, in recent years.
Here's the thing with reducing taxes. In the long term, economic growth will mean that people are better off. But in the short term, before that growth catches up, you do need to reduce spending to make up for any sort of windfall that you may temporarily lose as a result of a reduced tax take. And from what I can see, there is no appetite, serious appetite, in the Labor Party to reduce spending.
Yes, exactly. You've got to match tax cuts with a reduction in government spending, especially on welfare spending, which takes up a huge proportion of British overall government spending. But Andy Burnham shows no real willingness, I think, to reduce the size of the state. In fact, he has spoken in the past actually about even increasing the top rate tax in the UK to 50% or higher. And Burnham is a classic, big spending, pro-welfare socialist politician. And I really fear for the future of the UK with this economic agenda. The United States has far greater economic freedom than the United Kingdom, which means that there's far more job creation in America. There are far more opportunities for the American people. And Arthur Laffer has also rightly called for the elimination of inheritance tax in the UK, which is hugely destructive, I think. And also he's called for the repeal of stamp duty and also for a flat tax to be introduced. So, you know, he's always been a radical thinker and one of the most brilliant economists, I think, of recent generations. And I do hope this Labour government will heed at least some of the advice that Arthur Laffer is giving. But I do have doubts as to whether they will actually listen to this kind of much needed advice from across the Atlantic.
I think those doubts are well founded. My final question, Noel, and this is a question I think about myself a lot, and that is that debt and deficit is just ballooning in this country. It's ballooning in the US as well, but you have the reserve currency to fall back on, so you've got a bit more leeway. And there is no one really cares, effectively. There is no real appetite to try and get the fiscal position of this country under control. People just assume that you can keep adding money to the credit card without consequence. Do you think that now, sadly, some sort of economic crisis is not just inevitable, but probably necessary because politics can't seem to fix this problem?
Yeah, I think the issue of rising debt, not only, of course, in the UK, but all over Europe and here in the United States, it's a massive one. And unfortunately, I think not enough attention has been paid to this issue on both sides of the Atlantic, actually, in recent years. And it is an immense threat to the prosperity of future generations. And it's a vast problem, especially in continental Europe. You look at many European countries from Greece to Italy to France to Spain, massive levels of government debt. And this will impoverish future generations of Europeans. So this is a hugely important issue. It doesn't attract enough attention, frankly, for voters in elections. It should do. And it's a massive threat, I think, to the future prosperity of Europe and also to the United States as well, it has to be said.
Well, it will attract attention when these European countries can no longer pay their debts and go into default, I can tell you that. Noel, thank you very much for your time. Louise, I'll go to you first on this. The big problem that we have is that you can't come up with an adequate solution to economic problems if you don't diagnose the problem correctly. And the problem we have is that Andy Burnham thinks that the issue is neoliberalism. He thinks the problem effectively is capitalism. Now, when the tax burden in this country is as high as it's been since the Second World War, when the economy has never been more regulated than it is now, when more millionaires are fleeing than any other Western country, which doesn't tend to happen in capitalist utopias, how on earth can you possibly suggest that the problem here is capitalism? I would suggest if what we're seeing at the moment is capitalism, I'm terrified of what socialism looks like.
Yes, I must say, look, you can't fault Andy Burnham for not putting clear red water between himself and the Conservatives. In his big vision speech when he first became Prime Minister, he said the country had taken a wrong turn in the 1980s when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, and he wanted to go back to the 70s, when those of us who are of a certain age will remember we had the winter of discontent with literally corpses piling up in the streets, so we were taking loans from the IMF. If that's his vision for Britain, it's a bit terrifying, really. Arthur Laffer is advising Andy Burnham to adopt Thatcherite economics, and that's very nice. I would love to believe that Andy Burnham will go along with that, but what he actually has said is that we are going to fudge, recalculate the so-called fiscal rules so that we can borrow some more. I've got a lot of time for John Healey. I think he was a spectacularly good Defence Secretary, and he'll be as good of a Chancellor as the Prime Minister allows him to be. But when you look at the things that Laffer is specifically suggesting, they are Conservative Party policies. I know I've talked about Kemi a lot tonight, but she began the turnaround of the Conservative Party by announcing at Conservative Party conference that when she is elected Prime Minister and the Conservatives are in government, going to abolish stamp duty. That's literally one of the things Arthur Laffer just advised us to do. And we do need to stop the brain drain. We need to stop the wallet drain that's fleeing out of London. But will Andy Burnham listen? Don't hold your breath.
Stephen, I mentioned the Laffer curve before. For anyone who isn't aware of it, it's basically saying there is an optimum rate of tax, and then when you get to a point where you start raising taxes more, the end result is that the total tax take is less because you have people who are disincentivised from investing in the economy, or they just leave. Now, even the IMF now is saying that there is just very little scope left in this country to tax more. I would suggest we are tumbling down the dark side of the Laffer curve, and yet I can't see any attempt from this Labor government to actually change their economic philosophy.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we've just seen in Scotland the actual physical manifestation in fiscal terms of the Laffer curve, where they actually increased taxation and it cost them money. Actually, the net take was far less. Look, anyone who knows anything about Andy Burnham and the work that he's done in Manchester over the last 10 years realise that this is a pragmatic politician who works with business. He doesn't throw words like capitalism. He talked specifically about neoliberalism.
Stephen, to interrupt you, I apologise. That job just involves taking money from Westminster and dishing it out. That's not a particularly hard economic deal.
It doesn't. It actually involves raising money locally too, which is a great deal of what he did. But look,
it's not a great deal. It's the minority. I think about 75 to 80% of his budget is from Westminster, so it would be the minority of what he did.
Here's the actual key thing, which is the reason about taxation. You've got many countries like Finland and that which much higher tax rate than we have in this country. One of the reasons, the things that I was taught when I did my economics degree was that if you simply go for this sort of Pujardist idea of nobody pays tax, everybody can actually then trickle down their money to the rest, it simply doesn't work. One of the things that we've got the problem in this country, the biggest problem we have in this country is the public realm, where our defences are very poor, our prisons aren't being built, our health service is collapsing. We've got to actually fund it. If we simply reduce the top rate of tax and put more money in the pockets of the millionaires, they are not going to spend that on hospitals and prisons and the defences. They're going to keep it themselves. There is no marginal propensity to consume that. There's no velocity of capital there. So the reality is that taxation is the price you pay for living in a civilised society. And we have a point at the moment where the top rate of tax is, 48%. And we can live with that and the idea that there's millionaires are flooding out of the country, they did that long before anybody talked about a Labour government. But the idea that Andy Burnham is some sort of frothing red in tooth and claw socialist who's going to sort of drag people back into the Middle Ages, it simply shows that you don't understand the man.
Stephen, sorry, Louise, I'll give you a right of reply.
Oh, look, come on, it was his own words. Literally his own words.
Yeah.
We took a wrong turn in the 1980s.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the 70s. He quite literally said that. And that's what he believes in. He's an old-fashioned Kinnockite. In the same thing, he said that Neil Kinnock was his political mentor. You can't get away from the man's own words. He also said, I don't live and die by the bond market. It's terrific. If you raise our borrowing costs, we've got less money to spend on the NHS. What you don't seem to realise, Stephen, is that when you incentivise millionaires to put money into the economy, then the tax base grows and the government can spend more money on the NHS. That's what works.
But that's
and I hope he listens to Arthur Laffer, but I doubt he will.
The instincts of Liz Truss were absolutely right. The problem was in the execution. As I said to Niall, you need to reduce spending, at least in the short term, when you make tax cuts. That was the issue there. But that is not a problem of economic philosophy there. It is a problem of execution. We'll go to Matt. Matt, again, this must be frustrating hearing from the US, which does have a much more economically liberal approach to these issues, albeit, again, I think with a similarly disastrous debt and deficit problem, to hear about basically socialism, which is just stymieing growth in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, we're seeing socialism on the rise here, or communism. I mean, Mayor Mamdani in New York, very similar situation. Skyrocketing taxes in New York, what are you seeing? You're seeing not just millionaires leaving New York, which, by the way, are job creators in many cases. Those are people, spot on earlier was said, those are people who stimulate the economy. They also give a lot to charities and other organizations that matter. But you also have local business owners. You have other people leaving New York for places like Florida and Texas. Why? Better taxes, better environment. And look, as it relates to the UK, listen, you have a tax problem there. You get skyrocketing taxes. It's the bottom line is it's a spending problem. You have $3 trillion in debt in the UK, yet you have skyrocketing taxes. You got to $3 trillion in debt because of a spending problem, and a lot of that going to spending on, like I said earlier, housing for immigrants. Instead of spending on the infrastructure you need for your citizens. But it's not just that. The UK has been doing taxes and proposing taxes on U.S. tech companies who've been trying to invest in the UK. Well, when you do that, it's less likely for U.S. companies like those tech companies to want to invest in your country when you're taxing them. They'll just go to other countries where they're not seeing those same skyrocketing taxes. So whether it's in the UK or the U.S., this high tax policy doesn't work. Thankfully for President Trump, he's cut taxes here in the U.S.
Mally, I want to go to you. Mally, your response?
Well, a few things here. First off, we're acting like this guy is some mathematician who knows the exact rate that we can cut taxes and that these tax cuts would pay for themselves. President Bush, President Trump, and then President Trump again have cut taxes. Those tax cuts have added $10 trillion to the U.S. debt. It is not something that the U.K. can essentially replicate because the U.S. is able to spend or is able to do these tax cuts and spend more and have these bigger deficits. Our deficit is bigger when you look at it per GDP than you all's, but we're able to do this because A, we're the world's largest economy, and B, we're the world's reserve currency, and we get all this leeway. Soon, potentially, we're going to face a crisis. I don't know when that might be. Both parties have shown no resolve to tackle our deficit and debt.
Great.
But this broader question on whether Democrats are good economic managers, you can look at Democratic president's record and you can look at Republicans' president's record. Democrats, under their terms, we've had 10 years of Democrats since Reagan, 10 years of Republicans. Democrats have created 50 million jobs. Republicans have created about 5 million jobs. GDP growth under Democrats has been higher. You want to talk about states? The states in the United States that are blue are the biggest when it comes to GDP, and they are also net revenue exporters, while the red states take in more revenue than they put out. Blue states subsidize poorer red states.
Matt, I'll give you a right to reply there.
That's factually true. You can
look it up. Let's just take one state.
Let's
just take one state. Let's take New York. Right now, you've got people like Bill Ackman, who previously was very supportive of Democrats in the past, I believe. You got people like Elon Musk. Not in New York, but Elon Musk, who's in California, another state. He was very supportive of Democrats in the past. Why do these individuals turn their backs on the Democrat Party? Because the Democrat Party turned their backs on them. They created environments, such as in California, where Tesla moved from California to Texas. They created an environment in California through high taxes where Tesla, it made no sense for Tesla to stay there. It's very important to recognize that these companies, these massive companies or small businesses, tax policy matters to them. They've got to balance their own budgets. And when you're taxing the heck out of them, that doesn't help them in terms of staying in business or growing their business or hiring new employees. Go back to New York with Mamdani. See, lots of people live in New York for a place like Florida. Why? The tax policy in Florida, far better, far more respectful of business owners and citizens. Thankfully, under President Trump, he's cut taxes across the board. It's helping to stimulate economic growth. Let's do the math on it. Under President Biden, you had inflation at roughly 8.1% at its high. You got inflation right now around 3% or so, give or take. The bottom line is you have strong GDP growth so far to President Trump. You had record highs in the stock market. You've had stimulating manufacturing growth here in the country. What's making manufacturing growth be so strong in the country? Tax policy. Tax policy matters across the board. And when you tax and tax and tax, whether it's millionaires or small business owners or senior citizens or everyday Americans or people in the UK, the net result is you're going to get job creators and other people being hurt. You're going to have seniors hurt, other people beyond that hurt. Going back to the UK, because that's the bottom line here we're talking about right now, this is a major problem for the UK. Again, I go back to, you cannot solve your debt and deficit problem by raising taxes on the people of the UK. You solve it by cutting spending. President Trump did that.
Mally, final word to you on this.
Let's be clear. President Trump inherited an economy where inflation was 2.9%.
It's at 8.1%
It was at 2.9% when he became president. That is the inflation level that he was left with. Because of President Trump's tariffs, war in Iran, he has spiked inflation. It jumped up to 4.2%. It is 3.5% now, but it will go back up to over 4% potentially because the Iran war has spiked up again, and we have gas prices that are increasing. The tariffs have cost Americans $2,500 a year, and President Trump has kicked Americans off health care. 10 million Americans are going to lose health care because of the tax cuts you want paid for billionaires.
The tax cuts we're talking
point
about.
Point taken.
100%
All right,
that is not true.
lads, point taken. It is late at night, and to be honest, all these numbers are hurting my head. We will leave it there, but I will just suggest, and I'm looking at a graph in front of my screen at the moment, public debt growth since 2002. Switzerland, doing pretty well, minus 37%. They've got their debt problem under control in the last 20 years. Germany, plus 125, not great. France, plus 285%, even worse. USA, plus 557%, but at the same time, they can print money. They're the reserve currency. The UK, plus 801% public debt growth increase. Louise, I said this on Twitter the other day. I don't think politics can solve this anymore because it involves just too much debt reduction. I think, unfortunately, an economic crisis is inevitable. And on that cheery note, ladies and gentlemen, more coming up in the next hour, including this.
We're thrilled to be joined by a proud Marine Corps veteran Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D.? Where's J.D.? What the hell happened to J.D.?
Thank you to our global community for watching and listening to GB News. We're not only the #1 news channel in Britain, We're chosen by you around the world.
Thank you, Britain, for making GB News Radio such a huge success. Whether you're in the car, on the go, or listening at home, thank you for choosing us as your radio station.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis in the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Britain is not just a geographical expression. We are a people bound together by history and culture that are distinctively British. Join me to celebrate our music, theatre, artworks and literature which we can explore and enjoy together.
Everybody's welcome.
Sunday with Michael Portillo. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me. What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans? Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account. You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Live from London, England, this is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. A GB News exclusive from the White House to the Pentagon. Reform UK has spent the day building ties with Trump's America. Robert Jenrick joined us from Washington, D.C. earlier.
3,000 illegal migrants are being removed from the United States every day at the moment. And we've been very clear we want to see every single illegal out of the UK.
Well, elsewhere, the Conservatives want to evict foreign nationals from social housing, and as a foreign national myself, I say bravo. They've claimed that hundreds of thousands of homes could be freed up.
Andy Burnham's ambitions for Britain are too small.
And it's overdue, but Fauci faces the music. A Senate committee has voted to hold America's key COVID czar, Anthony Fauci, in contempt after he refused to answer questions during a hearing last week. Why did he stay silent, I wonder?
I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions.
And are we closer to knowing the heir to the MAGA throne? President Trump has reportedly told donors whom he will be supporting as the next presidential nominee. But after seeing some of the polling for Marco Rubio, you might be asking this question again.
Thrilled to be joined by a proud Marine Corps veteran Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D.? Where's J.D.? What the hell happened to J.D.?
I'll say it again, we will miss him when he's gone. Tyrant teens, the government's new social media curfew hasn't even started, and shock horror teenagers are already planning to ignore it. Is this proof that the government should mind its own business? And all day, GB News has been celebrating Britain by broadcasting from every corner of the country, showcasing the people and places that make this country so special. What do you love most about Britain? I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome back to The Late Show Live for a third and final hour, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for staying with us. We still have an all-star panel. London, it is former Conservative MP Louise Mensch and former Labor MP Stephen Pound. And Washington DC, former Chief of Staff to Marco Rubio, Matt Terrell, and Democratic strategist Mally Smith. Thank you once again for joining me, team. Let's go to that news around Anthony Fauci at the top of this hour. A US Senate committee has voted to hold Anthony Fauci in contempt of Congress after he failed to answer questions over his handling of the COVID pandemic. The Republican-led panel approved the motion by 8 votes to 7 after he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination more than 100 times. Committee Chair Rand Paul, a longtime critic of Fauci, accused the former chief medical advisor of ignoring a subpoena and avoiding scrutiny.
The chair directed Anthony Fauci to answer. He refused again. That is what we are voting on today. Not his opinions, not his policies, not anything he said from a podium 6 years ago. We are voting on whether a witness who has received the benefit of a sweeping federal pardon can be ordered by this committee to answer questions and then defy that order without consequence.
Joining me to help break down what is happening is political reporter at the Daily Mail, friend of the show, Victoria Churchill. Victoria, great to see you again. Bring me up to speed on the latest in this hearing.
Well, thanks so much for having me back, Will. Always great to be on with you. What we're seeing coming out of DC today is that the committee, so that is Rand Paul's committee, the committee that he chairs, it's the Senate Homeland Government Oversight Committee that he, that he leads now. They voted in a party line vote, 8 to 7, to hold Fauci in contempt of Congress. There was about 30 or 40 minutes of debate on the resolution to hold him in contempt earlier today, which I think is important to note because a lot of the times, you have the hearing and then you have the business meeting, and a lot of the times things are kind of resolved at the hearing. People have their, flashy lines, flashy moments that are just made for TV or made for social media, and then usually the business meetings are kind of calmer. But that's not necessarily what happened today. Several Democrats on the committee tried to table the resolution, so delay it to be brought up at a later date. And Paul was pretty insistent on going ahead and having that vote today. And like I said, it was a party line vote. All of the attempts to, not have this happen today were also party line votes, which, is important to note because we've also got people like John Fetterman on the committee that, would occasionally side with Republicans, but this was purely Republicans versus Democrats on that vote, and all the votes that we saw related to Fauci out of that committee today. And Senator Rand Paul posted just a couple hours ago that he has sent letters to the Department of Justice, that is to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, as well as Jeanine Pirro, who is, of course, the top judge in D.C. He has sent letters to those two, notifying them that Fauci was held in contempt of Congress. And of course, you just played the clip from the senator there. This is actually nothing to do with his actual conduct, either during the pandemic, before, after. The only time that this resolution really relates to is that conduct that we saw on Capitol Hill, last week. And, I just think that goes to show that Paul has faced a lot of attacks for pursuing this and pursuing this in this manner, but I think he was pretty clear in his remarks today of what exactly this vote was on. Again, given particularly that Fauci has had that broad sweeping federal pardon, from the former President Joe Biden. And that is also important to note because that pardon exempts him from, being prosecuted for anything federally. But there are also 3 Republican attorneys general who are doing their own investigations into Fauci on the state level. So that broad sweeping federal pardon actually does not exempt him from charges on the state level.
And what are the practical ramifications of Fauci being held in contempt here?
Well, so again, this lets the Department of Justice now, bring this up within their ranks. So basically, contempt of Congress is not identical to criminal contempt. And so just that congressional action doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it does allow for kind of further investigations, further looking into what he may have done. And then, of course, it's also important to note that the Senate has actually asked, they have this big committee, and then they also have a subcommittee that is led by Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. He is on this full committee, but he also leads a smaller group of senators, and they have actually asked him to come in, hopefully before the end of this Congress, I assume is his goal. He was supposed to get back to, Fauci and his team are supposed to get back to the Senate and figure out exactly when that time is. But that is going to be for a closed door hearing, which is important because obviously this was public, but that would be for a closed door transcribed interview, similar to what we've seen in the Epstein investigation, where they have the interview and then they release the transcript, sometimes video, for the general public to see.
Interesting times. Victoria, great to chat as always.
Thank you, Will. Always great to be on with you.
Let's go to DC first. Mally, I'll start with you. I think the most extraordinary element of this saga so far has been the diaries that came out was it last week or perhaps the week before. And what it showed to me was a civil servant who got basically caught up in his own celebrity, and he did become a celebrity during COVID. There are several really cringeworthy moments in those diaries where he's listing off the famous people that he spoke to, his media appearances. It feels to me like this was a man who, to use the old cliche, power corrupts. Well, if it didn't corrupt in this instance, it certainly distorted his view of reality from what I can see in those diaries.
Well, the diaries are certainly embarrassing, and there are a host of comments in there that do not reflect well on him. But with that being said, the investigation from Rand Paul, I understand why he took the fifth he pled the fifth, because Rand Paul on the outset has said he wants Fauci prosecuted and thinks he should be in jail. So with that coming into it, any lawyer is going to advise you that they're going to try to put you into a perjury trap. And I've seen a lot of conservatives talk about how it's indicative that he did something wrong that he pled the fifth. Well, President Trump pled the fifth 450 times in a deposition as well. But the diaries are embarrassing.
Yeah, Matt, I'm not surprised that he pled the fifth, and I agree with Mally. This is a common technique that is used in the American legal system. But at the same time, for me, this whole story comes back to the fact that the left and the media establishment lionised this man. They turned him into a god, the saviour of the American nation. And what we are seeing now is a very different picture of a man who arguably knew the real origins of COVID and decided for his own purposes to try and cover it up, allegedly, but I think that can be inferred, and also a desire for celebrity that should exceed a responsible civil servant.
Well, and the bigger question many Americans have and people around the world have is, did Dr. Fauci in fact contribute to this virus becoming a virus? In other words, was he funding this Wuhan lab? Was he doing that through gain of function? That's a big question Americans have, and I don't agree with him pleading the fifth over 100 times. The American people deserve answers. The world deserves answers. What happened under this man's watch is horrific. You had schools shut down. You had the economy essentially shut down. You had businesses that went out of business. You had people who were dying who couldn't see their loved ones for the last time because of social distancing. What he did was horrific. And by the way, the bigger thing we should also be talking about is that he got rich off of this. While he was in office, he was using federal employees who worked for him to go and get him awards. One of them being $900,000 that went directly to Anthony Fauci. He was focused on a book deal. You hit the nail right in the head, Will, earlier. He wasn't focused on COVID. He was focused on becoming a celebrity. This was a man who many people view, particularly on the heels of these dire injuries, as someone who's obsessed with being on TV. He's obsessed with himself. It's insane. And the bottom line here is the American people deserve answers. And there are states that likely will take action here. The Attorney General of Florida is looking at taking action. He's not out of the woods on this. But the bottom line here is justice should be served on this. This was horrific what he did. The bigger question was the main role he played in this. Did he, in fact, push funding towards that Wuhan lab? And to not answer questions is absolutely insane. It's disrespectful. It's an insult to the American people.
Matt, all these things you've listed that Fauci did, he did them while Trump was president. He reported to Trump.
So
is there any cognitive dissonance that you're having that all of these terrible things happened while President Trump was president? And if President Trump is such a good manager and can get to the bottom of all these things, why didn't he see through this?
He was trusting this individual like many Americans trust this individual. We tend to trust our healthcare individuals in this country. This is an individual who's in office for decades. So you can't blame President Trump for that. And by the way, there are many people in the White House who were arguing that we should not be closing down schools and arguing the opposite direction. But we're told by Dr. Fauci, I'm the science. Listen to me. I'm the science. I'm the healthcare expert. It was all lies, many would argue. And he should be answering questions. He should not be playing the fifth.
Do you believe that?
No, Mally, I'm sorry, Mally. I want to bring Louise in. This was one of the great failures of government, of the media, of wider society during COVID was the faith and the trust that was placed in the expert class instead of actually any sort of rigour and accountability. Trust the science was the line of the moment, and it's been proven now that that lack of accountability on people like Fauci led to was utterly corrosive.
Look, I think Matt makes a solid point, which is, was there gain-of-function research funded by Anthony Fauci that he tried to cover up? He knew, I think, that it was not a bat from a wet market, and that is a legitimate question. It absolutely is. However, I am not one of these people that is anti-vax and anti-social distancing. 1 million Americans died during COVID, and it was important that we kept transmission to a bare minimum. However, that's not the point about this thing about Anthony Fauci being held in contempt. I just want to tell Americans, because people lie to them all the time, whether you're for Anthony Fauci or you can't stand him and you think he should be in jail, nothing is going to happen because of this contempt citation. As Matt just admitted, the Florida Attorney General is coming after him. He has a constitutional right, like it or not, to plead the Fifth, to take the Fifth Amendment, and nothing criminal is going to come out of this because he got a sweeping pardon from Joe Biden. I think people should just level with the American public. This is going precisely nowhere because he got a blanket pardon and he has the right to take the Fifth. Like it or not, he does. Should he answer questions? Yes. Will he answer questions? No. Will he go to jail? Also no. And I think we should just be honest with the public and admit it. Whatever the side of the Fauci debate you're on, he's going nowhere. Nothing's going to happen to him.
Stephen?
Yeah, a couple of things. You quoted Lord Acton earlier on saying, all power corrupts. I think I'd quote Robert Caro, who said, all power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. And I think anyone who's read those appalling, as you rightly say, cringe-making diaries, you realise that what's running through that is a vanity of vanities. This is a man who's obsessed with his own ego and who's behaving in an outrageous manner. But don't forget, at one stage, he was the world's doctor. Yep. And we did trust the science of the president because we had nothing else to trust. I think what we have to do now is to identify, and however we do it, I don't know, we have to identify the origins of the pandemic. But Louise is absolutely right. It's not going to go anywhere. It may be possibly at a state level. We don't know. But what has happened and what is irreversible, and Rand Paul doesn't necessarily help by being so aggressive in his particular style, just as aggressive to President Trump, by the way. He's a thorn in the side of the Republicans as well as Mr. Fauci, Dr. Fauci. But what it does do is to actually reveal, I think, the reality of this particular man. And I think if ever there was a case of a god with feet of clay, this is a man. He did have feet of clay. And frankly, reading those diaries, it's embarrassing.
Well, one way you can understand this better is to listen to my interview with Matt Ridley on the wonderful new show Fire at Will, available on YouTube and all good podcast platforms. New episodes drop Wednesday and Friday at 6 p.m. British Standard Time. Make sure you get that ASAP. well, got the plug in. Let me know your thoughts by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen, the government's new social media curfew. If I recall, it was a voluntary curfew, which is an interesting concept in and of itself. It hasn't started, and teenagers are already planning to ignore it. Are you as shocked as I am? This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News. President Trump has reportedly given his clearest indication yet that he's backing Vice President JD Vance to succeed him, telling a private gathering of donors, "We need to elect JD." It's the strongest endorsement Trump has given Vance ahead of the 2028 race, but insiders insist Trump hasn't made a final decision, and he's said to still be encouraging talk of a Vance-Rubio ticket. But it seems that these reports have already impacted the betting markets, as Marco Rubio's odds of being the nominee have dipped 4% since those comments emerged, according to Polymarket. Well, let's go to my panel now, and no better person to go to first than the former Chief of Staff to Marco Rubio, Matt Terrell. Matt, what do you make of allegedly your former boss falling behind in Trump's estimations?
Well, Secretary Rubio has done a fantastic job as Secretary of State. There's no question he'd make a great president. It's up to him, of course, what he wants to do with his future. But he's also made clear on the record, I don't want to speak for him, but he's been clear on the record that if Vice President Vance runs, that he's going to support Vice President Vance. With that said, we are a long ways off here. In fact, President Trump discussed that in the Oval Office today. He was asked this very question about this issue. He even indicated that we're a long ways off here. A week is a lifetime in politics. We have weeks, months to go until the 2028 presidential election, the Republican primaries. But look, you know, Vice President Vance is a very talented individual. So is Secretary Rubio. There's no question that both these individuals are playing major roles in this administration. It's up to them what they want to do with their futures. But again, this is very early. We are very early in this process. If you go back to 2016, Jeb Bush was going to be the Republican nominee. Many people were arguing. If you go back to 2008, Hillary Clinton was going to be the Democrat nominee. None of those things happened. So anything can happen in politics, particularly when you're so early out.
Mally, how does the Iran conflict play into this? Because, of course, Vance was trusted with leading the negotiations with Iran, which have not been successful. At the same time, Marco Rubio has also been a prominent voice in the Iran conflict. I think instinctively, most people would at least going off their past personas, believe that Rubio would have been more in favour of action against Iran than Vance. But you can maybe make the argument either way. How do you think that influences this race, if at all?
Well, it definitely influences the race because you already see on social media essentially a proxy war within the Republican Party of some more American firsters who believe that this Iran war was a misstep, the Tucker Carlsons, et cetera, versus some of the more traditional Republicans who love to get us into all these foreign wars that are the neocon Bush types. The neocon Bush types favor Rubio, the new America firsters favor Vance. I don't really see a world, though, that Rubio is the nominee unless Trump ordains it. I think Vance is going to run, and there's going to be a coalescing around him on the Republican side. There is indications that Ted Cruz is interested in running for president again. I think that would be pretty easy for JD Vance to beat, but Ted Cruz has had issue with some of these America firsters being, in his mind, too anti-Israel. And he might challenge Vance on that. But I do think the Iran war is going to cast a pall over the overall election. We've seen President Trump's approval ratings drop down to second-term Bush levels. He's as unpopular as he's ever been, and it's mostly because of this quagmire in Iran. And as we get out from that, is this going to be Iraq circa 2008, where you had Obama was able to, really catch fire because he was able to say he was against this war from the start, and it's an albatross on Republicans? Does it start looking a little bit better? I don't even know what that looks like at the moment, but it's going to play a role.
Could I flip that question slightly, and that is, do you think it would be possible for someone to get this nomination if they were not endorsed by President Trump?
No, because even though President Trump's popularity overall in America is waning, he's still popular within the base of the party. I think he is also going to potentially endorse right off the bat, and those folks are going to go straight to either Vance or Rubio. I don't see it being anyone other than those two. But I do think that, and we saw this when Harris became the nominee on the Democratic side, voters don't like the candidate is preordained. I think if Trump wants to, he should let it look like Vance has earned it. Even though he's the VP and he's going to come as a juggernaut, if Trump bequeaths it to him and it says, this is my guy, no one else run, it's going to make him look weaker and make it look like he didn't earn it.
Stephen, the public doesn't like politicians who are preordained for leadership. Is that ringing any bells for you?
I wondered when you were going to raise that, but look, it's a couple of things. I have to say, sometimes you've got to look back to actually look forward. And if you actually look at the Tudor court, you realise one thing very, very quickly. No king, no president, no person in a position of power will ever favour one prince over the other, because they will always have that power. They'll keep that power up their sleeve to keep them guessing, to keep them moving around. Were he to say here and now that it's going to be X, Y or Z, that immediately creates a whole group of enemies on the other side, and it also gives that person the curse of being, this is my son, my beloved son. So it ain't going to work. Politics doesn't work that way.
Louise, your thoughts?
Look, I'm so glad you asked me that question, because I finally got a chance to say to Matt, if I were next to you, I would be a squeeing fangirl, because there is nobody on God's green earth that loves Secretary Rubio more than I do. And I supported him in 2016 for the nomination. I am so excited that you, as his ex-chief of staff, are on GB News with me. I'm having seriously a fangirl moment.
We get the best people on the Late Show Live.
I swear to God, yeah. Obviously, whoever President Trump picks is going to be the Republican nominee, the end. But Stephen's right, he's not going to want to become a lame duck. A week is indeed a long time in politics. I very much hope that over the course of the next few years, President Trump changes his mind and leads more towards Marco Rubio, who's been one of his most loyal lieutenants. And one thing President Trump loves indeed, is a winner. And when he looks at the polling, if all things were even, Marco Rubio greatly outpolls J.D. Vance, appealing to those swing voters, those purple states. He would be a more powerful top of the ticket. And even those people that love President Trump would not, I think, say that consistency is his greatest virtue. Ask any Iranian. He's changed his mind before on a number of issues. Hopefully, he will change his mind again on this. But look, if J.D. Vance is the nominee, I hope he is forced to pick Marco Rubio as his vice president. At least then I could get a silver medal. But Secretary Rubio, President Rubio, please, my dream. It would be so good.
Matt, a question for you.
I can't match that.
Matt, a question for you. How has Rubio changed since 2016?
I don't know if he's changed. I think even then he was someone who was very focused on foreign policy. And you saw that back in 2016. You saw that throughout his career in the U.S. Senate. Candidly, I think he's having a blast in his job as Secretary of State, I suspect. And I think, if you were to ask him, I suspect he would say that this is a job that he's, really excelling in. And you don't need to ask him that. Ask the American people. Just watch him in action. There's a reason why President Trump gave him so many different roles. When President Trump trusts and respects you, he gives you more responsibility. He's given Secretary Rubio a big portfolio, a lot of responsibility. So, look, we'll see what the future holds here. But Secretary Rubio is a very talented individual. I had the great honor and privilege to see that firsthand when he ran in 2016 for president. Saw that in places like Iowa and New Hampshire, around the country. And obviously, we're seeing it today as he is in this critical role as Secretary of State. I happen to think he's the greatest Secretary of State we've ever had. I'm biased, I know. But this is an important time. There's a lot going on the foreign policy stage. President Trump has given him a ton of praise, and rightfully so.
Yeah, look, we live in an age of just tragic mediocrities in politics for the most part, and it's very sad. For all of our radio listeners, Stephen Pound, in a wonderfully self-deprecating way, just put his hand up there.
That's my description.
But there is no doubt that J.D. Vance and Rubio are both incredibly intelligent and incredibly talented politicians. And to be fair, there are still a few in the Democrat circles. Someone like a Josh Shapiro, I think, is an immense talent. It's just a shame that I don't think the winds of change in the Democratic Party are necessarily heading in his ideological direction, but time will tell. Let's move on to some other stories in America. European teams could still boycott competitions, including the World Cup, as UEFA says FIFA's defence of its president, Gianni Infantino, changes nothing. The FA has sent a letter withdrawing its support for Infantino in reaction to the plan to sell off stakes in the World Cup to private investors. Also, President Donald Trump has dismissed reports that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth could be replaced, calling the claims false and completely unfounded in a Truth Social post. Well, time will tell. Trump's statement comes after reports questioning Hegseth's future at the Pentagon amid scrutiny over the administration's handling of military operations. And finally, President Trump has signed 2 executive orders that the White House said aims to restrict eligibility for birthright citizenship and ban birth tourism. The orders come just over a month after the United States Supreme Court rejected Trump's first attempt to restrict the guarantee of birthright citizenship enshrined in the US Constitution. And finally, US Senator Mitch McConnell has been discharged from a rehabilitation centre and will continue to recover at home. The 84-year-old Kentucky Republican was admitted to hospital in mid-June after experiencing a fall and a mild case of pneumonia. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, Andy Burnham's been receiving some advice on his social media strategy. What do you think it is? It might just be the epitome of peak woke. But first tonight, and on a related note, the government's new social media curfew hasn't even started, and teenagers are already planning to ignore it. This is The Late Show Live, only on GBNews.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome to your GB News weather update, coming to you from the Met Office. Now, there is some rain again across northern parts of Scotland today, but further south it's another dry day with lots of sunshine on offer. We just need to watch out for a few showers across western parts of England and Wales at the moment. They will push a little bit further eastwards this morning before largely fizzling out. So then by the afternoon, mostly dry for England, Wales, Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland. Much wetter across central and northern parts of Scotland with some blustery winds as well. Temperatures are generally going to be up a degree or so compared to yesterday in the southeast. We're looking at highs of around 25 or 26 Celsius. High teens, perhaps low 20s for some parts towards the north. There's more wet weather to come across northern Scotland through the end of the day. We are going to see some relatively high rainfall totals building up through today and into tomorrow, particularly around the northern and western Isles and the Highlands as well. Central, southern, eastern parts of Scotland drier here with a largely fine end to the day across Northern Ireland, and for England and Wales a fine picture too. Lots of clear skies through this evening, so some late sunshine, yes, but with that clear sky we are going to see temperatures taking a bit of a drop overnight away from the northwest where it stays quite cloudy and there will be some rain. Even across parts of Northern Ireland, cloud will push in as we head towards dawn and we could see a bit of rain arriving here. Otherwise, yes, with that dry, clear weather, it is going to be a fresh night. Some rural spots in England and Wales could get as low as 4 or 5 Celsius tonight, so perhaps even a bit chilly for some of us first thing tomorrow morning. Then through tomorrow itself, yes, a fresh start to the day, but again, lots of sunshine across England and Wales. Further north and west for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, a cloudier picture. The heaviest, most persistent rain still across northern and western parts of Scotland, with those totals continuing to build up. In the southeast, it's going to be hotter than today. We're seeing temperatures back in the high 20s. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Tonight, we are celebrating Britain and 5 years of the People's Channel. What 5 years it's been. It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys and I am live from the epicentre of the Calais migrant crisis tonight. Okay. It's incredible to think that there's so many tents here. I mean, I can't even begin to suggest how many there are.
I'm at the North Shields fishing quay, and it's a beautiful day. And I'm finding out whether Brexit has been a plus or a negative.
This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Well, in just a few minutes, the polls will close and you will have decided who gets the keys to number 10. I have spent the day at the unlikely epicentre of Britain's political earthquake.
Please welcome your host, Nigel Farage. We'll be talking Middle East, we'll be talking banking.
Today marks the start of a new era in British politics.
Well, the budget, it's gone down pretty badly.
President Donald Trump. The interview.
Thank you, Ben.
We decided that we wanted to smash the gangs. I'm Patrick Christys, I'm from GB News. You are a human trafficker, aren't you?
Are there?
Yes.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, live from Somerset with State of the Nation tonight.
How many new homes have been built since Labour took power?
I don't have the exact. I'm not Wikipedia.
You don't have...
No, I'm not Wikipedia.
No,
I'm here to talk to you about policy.
And I'm joined in Westminster by a farmy army.
So who does he look like then?
Okay.
Oh, well,
Think he's got the ginger tinge?
Fat rind face. Look at that order. Oh, that's my slam. Here we go. Oh, hello. Hope you saw that live on GB News.
President Trump has arrived in Britain for his historic second state visit to the United Kingdom.
Hello and welcome to Crowborough. Get ready, because the most exciting night in general election history starts now. I do actually want to say a big thank you. You have made GB News the #1 news channel in the country.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I just popped out to get a glass of water and I came back to an absolutely vicious debate between Stephen and Louise. I know it's not exactly cricket, but let's clip that up and put that out. That was great entertainment. And also, one of the beauties of debates in between ad breaks, not Ofcom regulated. So it really was spicy. I wish you were there to see it. Anyway, let's go to new polling from Census-Wide, which suggests more than 8 in 10 16 to 18-year-olds would simply switch to voluntary social media would simply switch voluntary social media restrictions off. So Keir Starmer announced the plans in his final weeks in office, with social media apps expected to block access between midnight and 6 a.m. by default for 16 and 17-year-olds, but users would still be able to opt out. So is this more evidence that the best thing the government can do is just stay out of our lives? With me now is the head of emerging technology police at the Consumer Choice Centre, James Chanowski. James, great to see you. As I've said a couple of times flagging this on the show so far, in my experience, a voluntary curfew with teenagers doesn't really tend to work out all that well because, newsflash, they're teenagers. What do you make of this policy?
Yeah, no surprise that we're seeing over 80% of kids say that they're not going to do the thing the government would like them to do. Frankly, even as an adult, I'm not going to want to be inclined to do that either, right? So no surprise that that kids are also going and saying in droves that they're going to opt out of these, so-called parental restrictions that the government is looking to go and put in place here by, basically saying, hey, no social media for you between midnight and 6 a.m. The reality is that, social media, this isn't about like addiction or anything like that. It's just a simple reality that kids are going to circumvent. This was a bad idea from the Keir Starmer prime ministership days, and we're glad to see that it is out the door, because the reality is that kids are going to go and circumvent these things very easily. And while this was on the periphery, the main policy that he was looking at doing, which was basically doing age verification for everybody online, was very draconian and would have resulted in everybody, I think, having a worse off experience online. So glad to see that got scrapped, and unsurprising that kids are also going and saying no to the whole plan in general.
Yeah, my home country of Australia was the first major Western country to introduce a social media ban for under 16s. It's a bit difficult to get exact numbers, but my understanding is around 70 to 80% of kids are just circumventing it through VPNs anyway. And so the question has to be, why should the state be responsible for these sorts of limitations on social media instead of, say, entrusting parents to know what's best for their own children?
Yeah, I think that's the fair question to be asking. I think that there's a big conversation happening in the United States that we saw happening in the education policy space, where parents were fighting against school boards and their school systems because they wanted parental choice. And I think that if we're following that logic to its natural conclusion, that has to go and extend beyond the classroom into the home more broadly speaking. I believe in people and parents, by comparison, to be able to go and tackle this issue when it comes to how their kids are going to be operating in the digital ecosystem. There are many tools available to parents that are out there. There are many things on the phones themselves that can help make this kind of, tailored online experience happen. And pretending that the government is all of a sudden going to come in as the nanny, the ultimate nanny state here, and actually be able to be a better parent than you, I think is false. And it's something that I think ultimately undermines the entire notion of parental choice and parental empowerment to help them be the proper role that they're having in their household.
At the same time, we don't, for example, allow parents to let their kids smoke or take drugs or drink because the state has decided that the risk there is so high that it justifies that restriction on parental freedoms. Why is social media different to those examples?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because ultimately, at the end of the day, social media is not tobacco. It's not alcohol. It's not some kind of hard drug. These are actual just products that are connecting consumers to ideas and people and communities that they otherwise did not have the ability to basically have access to before. And so they're not mirroring the kinds of addictive features that you would see out of drugs and alcohol, things where we've seen the government take a heavier hand in than otherwise noted. And I think that it is worth noting that what the government is targeting here is speech. It is when you're looking at an unlimited feed, right? That's one of the things that they're going after. For example, when they're talking about design of social media, they're like, oh, the endless scroll is an addictive design feature. That's not true. Insofar as that, what if all we had every single day, no matter what you did on the scrolling, was just paint drying on a wall? The reality is that people would get pretty bored with that very fast and turn away from it. The reality is that the value of that feature comes from the fact that it is presenting speech in the form of content to consumers that they like. And that is where the government, I think we need to be very careful about empowering them to try to treat this as something that they can go and have a hand in. It is not alcohol. It is not tobacco.
James, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Stephen, I couldn't help but notice your disapproval in the corner of my eye there. I'll give you the first crack at this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's not alcohol, it's not tobacco, but it's lethal. It's a killer. Look, we've got young people who have died because of what they've seen online. Young people who have been blackmailed into exhibiting themselves and end up with the worst sort of sexual abuse. Now, the worst
Stephen, just to interrupt, that's true, but people die from vending machines falling on them and coconuts falling on their heads.
Yeah,
that's not in and of itself not a reason.
I was going to come on to the fact that the government cannot simply say we're not going to do anything about this. The government has to do something. Now, fortunately, we have many reasons to be grateful to the great nation of Australia for a whole range of reasons. One of the things we can actually see how it's working or not working in Australia. Now, to say, as James said, it's down to parental control, that would be marvellous if parents had that control. But parents do not have that control. Now, you can switch off the router, you can do a whole load of things, but ultimately, they will find their way around it. We have to actually address the issue of the content creator and the platforms. People are not watching cats doing funny things on TikTok. They're watching advice on how to kill yourself.
No,
we have to do something.
Stephen, stop, because that is alarmist. Again, is that content out there? Yes, but far more kids are watching cats doing stupid things than, advice on how to kill yourself, for example. So that's just, again, I think we need to be sensible with how we're framing this, while still acknowledging there are dangers on the internet. But my question to follow up with what you just said there is, why do you think that kids would be able to get around restrictions that their parents place, but at the same time, given what I said earlier about the mediocrities in politics and the fact that the state is pretty much useless at doing anything, that somehow they will be able to put restrictions in place that kids won't be able to get around?
Because the state can actually negotiate with the content providers and with the platforms, even though many of them are offshore and in places outside our jurisdiction. But the bottom line is, you cannot simply say, hey, it's too difficult, we're not going to do anything.
No, I'm not saying it's too difficult. I'm saying as a matter of principle, I believe in parental responsibility. But Louise, I've got a sense here that you will be on a unity ticket with Stephen.
Yeah, you're right, actually. I don't think that free speech comes into it. These are kids. And I think we've been far too permissive in giving kids the same rights as adults.
No, this isn't about the freedom of children. This is about the freedom of parents.
I don't agree with you. I do not agree with you at all. Sorry.
No, but at least frame what I'm saying correctly.
On this one, we are going to be divided, I'm afraid to say. I don't think kids should be allowed to do this. However, what the government is proposing is a useless workaround. Having a voluntary curfew means that you're not having a curfew. I can voluntarily choose to eat spinach instead of French fries, but I'm afraid I don't actually do that. I'll choose French fries every time. If the government wants to do something useful that perhaps the whole nation should get behind, instead of having a stupid, easily avoidable ban between 12 midnight and 6 a.m, how about saying when you go into school every day, you have to put your phone in a locker until you come out? How about that? How about doing something physically to remove these distractions so that there's no bullying in school? There are ways around it, but this is not the way to do it. Once again, Keir Starmer left us with the worst of all possible worlds, a nanny state regulation that is not going to be effective. Look, we ban kids from, we don't allow parents to give their children alcohol. We don't allow parents to give their children cigarettes. We don't allow parents to take a 5-year-old into a horror film with an 18 certificate. It's not all about the parents, but this is going to be useless. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time.
That analogy doesn't work there, and I was trying to get that out of the past guest and I didn't get it. But the difference is that you can mitigate against risks in certain situations and not in others. Whereas there is no way really to mitigate against the risk of smoking for an 8-year-old or mitigate against the risk of drinking for an 8-year-old, because any nicotine or any alcohol at that age is terrible. Whereas there are tools in place here where you can mitigate risks if you are a parent. Mally, I'll go to you for your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm of two minds, because first, I'm not a big fan of blanket bans. I also think that a ban that's not really a ban, that's voluntary, is incredibly stupid, because you're half in, half out.
Yeah, sorry, to be clear, we all agree this is a ridiculously stupid policy, but I just want to broaden it out to social media restrictions.
It's the principle, surely, we're talking about.
Well, social media restrictions, here's the thing. There is a definite problem here. Jonathan Haidt, he's a researcher in the United States. He's written this really powerful book called The Anxious Generation. And it basically has documented that Americans, and I think kids around the world, are way more anxious. They have higher levels of depression, anxiety, suicide, and it can be tied to social media use. The more you're on these apps, the more you're on your device, the worse you feel. And look, I'm an adult in my 30s, and I'll sometimes be scrolling, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending so much time on this? I'm not feeling better. So how do we expect someone under 18? And I think one thing that we could do, and there's actually some proponents of tech accountability who are pushing this, it's called age-appropriate algorithms. And essentially what it does is, first off, it does more to try to prevent adult content from coming into the algorithm. It doesn't assume you're adult. It's doing things to filter it out. And then second, what it's doing is it's tamping down on the addictive nature. Because when you're on TikTok or Twitter, they want you to stay there every second. So they are making these dopamine spikes in your brain to keep you there. So there is an addiction component that we should not have children just facing on their own, even if they have parents who are not paying attention. I don't think those kids should just have to suffer because the parent is not necessarily paying the right attention, or maybe doesn't even know.
Yeah, I interviewed a British poker champion, Liv Boeree, wonderful, wonderful woman, and she described social media for kids as digital slot machines for children, which was a powerful line. Matt, where do you stand?
Well, look, this has obviously made its way into the United States. You know, the U.S. Congress right now is taking up a piece of legislation. It's working its way through Congress called the Kids Online Protection Safety Act. It's received bipartisan support. So this has made its way into the United States. Obviously, this is a global discussion taking place right now about what amount of usage or kind of usage that children should be having with these social media platforms. And we do need to be mindful of that. There are kids who have seen content online, for example, who have sadly committed suicide. But there's also kids who've seen content online and been inspired to go be a great chef, or to go be a business titan, or to go be a teacher. You know, what we are seeing right now is that these online platforms are providing some positive education to our kids as well. So this is a balancing act, no question about it. Obviously, we have to be very mindful of the kind of content that our kids are seeing. But at the same time, we got to be very careful. And I know we're not saying we want total bans here. I get it. But once you start putting these things in motion, you know, what's the next step that the government may take, right? Is it, well, if you're over 18 or an adult and there's certain content that governments don't want people to see, it's just, you got to be very mindful of the trickle-down impact of this stuff while at the same time trying to protect our kids. It's a very, very tough balance right now. But it's something the U.S. Congress is actually taking up as we speak. We'll see where this all goes here in the United States.
Yeah, I think that's well phrased. Louise?
I do just want to say that I want to push back against the opening segment here. It's absolutely addictive. Is it alcohol? No. Is it cigarettes? No, it's worse. Meta and other platforms have admitted that they have addictive features in there, which, as your guest said, kids really aren't equipped on their own to deal with. Yes, it's addictive, 100% addictive, and I'd rather that they tackled the algorithm than just try to effect an easily escapable blanket ban.
Okay, well, if you've been affected by anything that you have heard, Samaritans are here to help, day or night, 365 days a year. You can call them for free on 116 123. That's 116 123. You can email them at joe, that's J-O, at samaritans.org, or visit samaritans.org to find your nearest branch. Let's delve into some more stories on the front of tomorrow's papers. We're going to revisit the front of the Times, which we covered at the first hour, but I don't think we did it justice, and I think it's an important story. The Times are reporting that a fifth of student loans now go to non-British citizens, risking billions for the taxpayer if they later leave the country and refuse to repay. I got the preliminary thoughts of my panel in London here. I will go to DC because I know that there are equally economic pressures on US universities, Matt, and we were talking about the risks that are associated with basically universities getting bucket loads of foreign students coming in and then potentially having to compromise on academic standards because suddenly they become key to your commercial model. It's a huge problem in the UK, and I know it in Australia as well. What's the position in the US?
Yeah, obviously we've been struggling with these challenges here in the U.S. Obviously, kids who are citizens of the U.S., applying for loans or trying to get seats in our universities and having those seats be taken by non-citizens. That's been a debate taking place among many parents and students here in the United States. But the bigger reality of this is I just don't think it's appropriate for the government to be covering anybody's loans, whether you're a citizen of the United States, for example, or an immigrant coming to the U.S., or for that matter in the UK. It's just not appropriate. The other discussion to have is how outrageous many of these loans have become. The higher education system, whether it's in the UK or the United States, in my opinion, is deeply broken. It is not, in many cases, preparing our kids for the future jobs. You're seeing this rise in socialism and communism. I think one of the reasons you're seeing that is many young people were sold a bill of nonsense with higher education, saying, look, go spend a bunch of money, take out a massive loan, hundreds of thousands of dollars, thousands of dollars on a student loan, and you'll get a good job after a 4-year degree. That doesn't happen. So I think what you're seeing right now in higher education is a real broken system. I think it's a real challenge, and I just don't think anybody should be having their student loans picked up by the U.S. government, i.e. the taxpayers. My parents both took out loans. They paid them back in full on their own. They didn't need the government to do it. Whether you're an immigrant or a citizen, the government should not be picking up your student loans.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I would also suggest as well, I think, and to be fair to Andy Burnham in this country, something which he has said, which I think is correct, is that not all kids should be going to university. And the balance so far since Blair has certainly tipped too far to, well, you know what, if you don't get a university degree, you are somehow a failure, and therefore we need to push kids into the tertiary sector who obviously aren't suited to it. And Burnham has said, well, we need to redress that. So I'll give him credit on that score. Mally, your thoughts?
Yeah, I 100% agree that we shouldn't necessarily make it the standard that everyone has to go to a 4-year college or a university, and that the trades are an important route where you can get a well-paying job, especially because there are going to be folks who want to work with their hands who don't see college as the route for them, but if they're forced down that road, it's going to leave them with debt and a loss of purpose and identity. On the question of foreign students getting loans going to in the UK. I was a foreign student. I didn't get a loan, and I don't think foreign students should necessarily get a loan unless they are folks the UK are trying to poach to become citizens, and you think they're going to be like the next top neuroscientist, because it doesn't make sense. Like, the universities, both the US and the UK, have great universities, and they draw foreign talent to the country, which is great. When I was in the UK, I spent some money at Tesco, helped the economy in the local area by spending my parents' money. But with that being said, it kind of negates the purpose if you then gave me a loan, the UK government did, and then I go back home after spending my time, and the education that you helped fund comes back with me, and it's especially bad if I'm not paying the loan back. So I don't think that makes sense unless it's part of a program for long-term citizenship for a critical area. But again, that would be very narrow.
Mally, did you say earlier you went to Cambridge?
I did. My mom loves it when I mention it.
I bet. At the same time, are you and is your mum angry about how Jason Arday has trashed Cambridge's reputation?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, well, obviously that scandal has not hit the US yet.
It will.
We will have to cover that with you on a separate show, but I suggest you look into the easiest way to explain it would be the UK's equivalent of the Claudine Gay scandal, except 10 times more embarrassing, and with 10 times, I would suggest, greater levels of what's the word I can say without getting in trouble?
You can't.
You know what? I'm just going to drop it. Go and Google it, mate.
Can I just make a point about the student loans?
You can.
Yeah, look, the overseas students have to pay their own tuition fees and their own maintenance charges, except for one group of overseas students, and that is overseas students from parts of the old European Union. They're the only people who are entitled to apply for grants. So if you're from China or Japan or the Philippines, you don't get a penny from the state. So the idea that this is people from all over the third world...
Stephen, does it matter? It's 25%.
And the problem is that the biggest group of people, in geographical terms, are in fact Romanians. Now, why aren't we...
Okay.
We have a reciprocal arrangement where students from this country can go and study overseas and get a grant. So we should be working with the Romanian government to actually get this money back.
Stephen, I'm sick of arguing that the sky's blue with you. We've said that it will cost between 1.2 to 2.2 billion a year, and that foreign students are 25% less likely to repay their loans.
But they are European students.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Yep, that's a problem. Sure, agreed. Yeah. And Stephen, look, you know, in the interests of reconciliation after that, a topic that you have been wanting to discuss all night, quickly at the Metro, it's up on your screens now, ladies and gentlemen. Sitting room only at pubs. There's a bid to stop punters standing and buying booze at the bar, which is risking a return to COVID. PM's experts caution. This is in Westminster. What do you make of it?
Absolutely insane. Now, look, I think there's certain things you talked earlier on about what makes you proud to be British, what makes you proud of this country. And I said, we actually get down to the rubber dub and stand there at the bar having a chat to people you've never spoken to before. The idea that you're going to have to go down the dog and duck, sit at a table, and then dial up a phone, and then some poor so-and-so is going to get from behind the bar, you know, get me a pint of something evil and bring it over and put it on the table. You know, it simply doesn't make sense. Now, what they're talking about is Westminster City Council basically killing the whole hospitality trade in Westminster, Covent Garden, Oxford, all that area around there. Now, listen, there are people there's some pubs, some restaurants where you're happy to go along and order up, but 99%, the thing about pubs is that the last area of social capital that's actually in this, it's a place where we meet people. We don't have enough human contact. Hands off the pub. Let us stand at the bar. Let us chat to strangers, and let us bore them if necessary, but let's at least bore them in the British way.
Here. Can I just ask gently, why has this Labor government waged an all-out assault on pubs over the last 2 years?
Not aware that we have. I mean, the pub... The reason why the pub trade is actually declining is largely to do with the smoking ban, the drink driving ban, and of course people say that we're somehow the national insurance issue affects young people working in pubs. When of course national insurance isn't paid by people under 21.
Rachel Reeves did jack up those taxes, and she was forced into a U-turn just before she got kicked out of
Andy
Number 11.
Burnham's just cut VAT.
But let me just admit that this is a Conservative council proposing this, and I will say, in a spirit of cross-party unity, it is a disgrace. What do you think you're doing?
I'll drink to that.
Pubs are the backbone of Britain. I hope Kemi sits on them like a ton of bricks, because this is the least popular policy that we will ever enact.
I don't have much time left. Matt, your favourite tipple?
Listen, I'm all for protecting the pubs, right? So my bigger concern right now, I saw a study out today where less and less young people...
No, we don't have time. I just want to hear your favourite drink.
Oh, sorry. Favorite drink? Miller Lite. I'm from Wisconsin. Miller Lite beer.
Diet Coke.
Oh, come on. Oh, dearie me. I don't have any time to argue with you, unfortunately. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That is all we have for this evening. We really appreciate you joining on what has been a great day for GB News and for the nation. We will be back here tomorrow midnight BST time. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you again to my panel, and have a lovely night.
Let's have a Foster's.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome to your GB News weather update, coming to you from the Met Office. Now, there is some rain again across northern parts of Scotland today, but further south it's another dry day with lots of sunshine on offer. We just need to watch out for a few showers across western parts of England and Wales at the moment. They will push a little bit further eastwards this morning before largely fizzling out. So then by the afternoon, mostly dry for England, Wales, Northern Ireland and southern parts of Scotland. Much wetter across central and northern parts of Scotland with some blustery winds as well. Temperatures are generally going to be up a degree or so compared to yesterday in the southeast. We're looking at highs of around 25 or 26 Celsius. High teens, perhaps low 20s for some parts towards the north. There's more wet weather to come across northern Scotland through the end of the day. We are going to see some relatively high rainfall totals building up through today and into tomorrow, particularly around the northern and western Isles and the Highlands as well. Central, southern, eastern parts of Scotland drier here with a largely fine end to the day across Northern Ireland, and for England and Wales a fine picture too. Lots of clear skies through this evening, so some late sunshine, yes, but with that clear sky we are going to see temperatures taking a bit of a drop overnight away from the northwest where it stays quite cloudy and there will be some rain. Even across parts of Northern Ireland, cloud will push in as we head towards dawn and we could see a bit of rain arriving here. Otherwise, yes, with that dry, clear weather, it is going to be a fresh night. Some rural spots in England and Wales could get as low as 4 or 5 Celsius tonight, so perhaps even a bit chilly for some of us first thing tomorrow morning. Then through tomorrow itself, yes, a fresh start to the day, but again, lots of sunshine across England and Wales. Further north and west for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, a cloudier picture. The heaviest, most persistent rain still across northern and western parts of Scotland.